All right. Brian on the phone.
Brian, are you on the phone? Clemency, you on the line?
Yeah.
All right, everybody, we're going to get started. So thank you everyone for coming. Dr. Clemency, would you like to say any words now that you are no longer in charge?
Good luck, sucker.
Wow. So as we go through, we're going to actually kind of go a little bit out of order today because Dr. Bart is running late and he wanted to be present for the CMAC semester report. So we're going to move on and skip to the WREMAC chairman report, which I don't have a very large report, but I do have a couple of things that have been brought up over and over and over, and I want to kind of go through. Who else is on the line besides Dr. Clemency?
So that choice here, Sarah Connolly.
Who was the last one? I'm sorry.
That's what I said.
Oh, hey Jen.
Tim Richardson.
From Rural Metro.
Tim Richardson, City of Olean.
Anybody else?
Joe Hart from Union Street.
Dr. Bart, will you be joining us in person or just over the phone today?
No, I'm on the way. I'll be there.
All right. So, as my first order of business as WREMAC chair, I know several people have asked over and over about some of these standing subcommittee reports that we have on here that have kind of existed forever and never have any reports. And so those include the Nurse Advisory Committee report, Pre-Hospital Advisory Committee, disaster, equipment, research and education, and Josette, do we need to keep interfacility transport protocols on a standing agenda item?
I think probably not. I think that could be ad hoc if we have new protocols or a need for a new protocol.
All right. So, does anyone have any objection to removing those from the agenda as standing items, with the understanding that, of course, we can convene ad hoc committees at any time? Yes, you are staying on there, Beth.
I know.
Okay.
There is. I was approached back in August. The nurse manager at Suburban in the ER, he's interested in taking over and has offered to take over and get back going the nurse advisory committee. That's completely up to you, because there is somebody that wants to do it.
We have I guess we have a reason to have a nurse advisory committee on an ongoing basis. I'll open up for comments.
No.
I guess I see if we're going to get a report and it's going to be useful and it's going to be monthly, like with each meeting, and it's going to, and absolutely, I'm fine with having a report from the Hospital Nurse Association. But if it's going to be a hit and miss thing, then
I'm happy to reach out to said nurse manager and try to confirm that those details, and I'll bring it back to the next meeting.
and as long as it represents the general region's, input on nursing, not just Suburban Hospital or whatever.
Are there, Brian, are there members of that committee? Or is it?
Could someone voice to those of us online what's being said, because I can't hear.
Sure. You're right there. So are you. All right, so the discussion was just about whether or not to keep the nurse advisory committee report. Is there some interest from one of the nurse managers who would be interested in being involved with that? The question was, do we have a need to have that ongoing? And the question was, or I guess the suggestion was made that Dr. Lynch reach out to the nurse manager who is interested in being involved and discussing that, and Dr. McGee said that as long as it represents the feeling of all the hospitals and nurses in the area, that would be something that we could consider. So I guess my suggestion then to that regard would be that we remove all the other committees from standing agenda items, with the exception of the nurse advisory committee meeting pending Dr. Lynch's discussion with the specific nurse involved or interested next month, or next meeting.
Just my question to I guess anybody, are there members of that committee, or what, historically, what has been the purpose of that committee?
The nurse managers participated in it, and it's been probably 6 years since it existed. And just some of the previous discussions, probably EPCRs was the biggest discussion that took place in that group in the past. And the reason why it sort of fell apart wasn't probably so much leadership as it was nurse managers' ability to commit to another meeting. And really, at the end of the day, I'm not sure if the group accomplished anything. I mean, it certainly raises issues, but I'm not sure it really changed anything. But I think these are two.
This is shows that I'm probably one of the few that actually has been around long enough to remember what they did. They're actually, the nurse managers used to play an important role with their committee in getting back to the ER, things that we discussed, as well as them having their input with things that were going on. And oftentimes that would drive a lot of the decisions we made and policies we made based on some of the things that were the insights that they would bring in. I understand that logistically they have a hard time getting together to meet, and certainly they were a much more cogent group back then. Probably around the time that we started doing PEP was about the last time, with the WMD stuff was the last time that they really played a big role. And since then, there are just agendas at various hospitals that just drive a lot of their attention now.
It seems like it's two different issues. Removing them from the agenda doesn't mean that the group can't exist. It just means that they're not a standing item on the agenda. If they meet, they can always be added back on. So I think we're sort of saying two different things. The way I took the initial discussion from Dr. Walters is that we just wanted to remove these committees that haven't had a report for the last long time from the agenda, but that doesn't preclude them from meeting.
Now, this shows that just back again. I agree that it's a good idea to take a lot of these chunks that there's nothing going on. But one of the things is part of the impetus for something to go on is when we discuss things, or else bring their names up. And oftentimes, well, I'm not going to say oftentimes, but in the past, historically, that has been sort of the seed to get this going. I think what might not be a bad idea is that maybe on a twice-a-year basis, is that we bring up if anybody has anything related to any of these, that maybe we do bring things up and maybe on a cycle, so that maybe every January, June, we're not just hitting everybody. But just so that we can remind people of a venue to take care of issues.
Time for him to take his pills.
I'm sorry, Jose, carry on.
That's pretty much what I just wanted to say. It's just that oftentimes just the mention of the committees reminds people of projects or things that need to be looked into. So maybe once a year, twice a year, I don't know, we do it on a cycle that maybe every month that's the committee we bring up, and if anybody has any thoughts for that committee as far as things that need to be done twice a year, that can be decided. But I think that just leaving them out in the sort of some aura somewhere out there, they're never going to be revisited for the most part, except some of the things related to protocol. And there's some of these that are worthwhile. Disaster committee, for example, is something that we have a lot more involvement with, and every once in a while our input is probably a good thing. So maybe bringing that up once a year, even the interfacility transports at that point in time, if people recall that there are issues coming up, and maybe that can be revisited, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, we can still form an ad hoc committee at any time that we need to. I mean, that's in our bylaws. Do we need to bring them up every so often? Do we need to just convene and add ad hoc committees when they come up and then take them off the agenda when they're no longer pertinent? Or
I think that there's a couple ways to look at this. Number one,
Hey, Brian.
one second, Brian. Kevin's talking down at the end, but.
One, like with the nurse advisory committee, first and foremost, does the committee even exist right now? Which I think the answer is no, there is a committee. So I think one is, before we worry about them giving a report, even annually or semi-annually, we need to have a committee that's formed and managed and someone's overseeing. So I think that's the first step, which Josh Lynch was talking about, which is reach out to the person who's interested, see if we can form one, see if we get people to go to meetings and follow up, and then get a report. How often they report or how often these committees report can be a different topic. But even like with disaster, how often is disaster even asked to do something specific to, you know, the meetings monthly or as they come up on a regular basis? So the question is there a committee in place? Like disaster, there really is no committee. I'm listed as being in charge of it and haven't been given a task since I've been in charge of it. Don't have anyone who's offered to come up and say they're part of the committee, and I've been around for about 6 years now. And I've never heard a report from disaster, so.
Okay, so I'm gonna summarize for those of you guys on the phone. Kevin was saying basically that, do any of these committees actually exist other than being listed on paper? Do they actually need to do anything? And so therefore, do we actually need to have them here, or do we just convene them when necessary? Right?
That's,
Brian, you had a point?
I guess sort of dovetail on Kevin, I would say that if any committee, subject, committee agenda item goes on the agenda for next week, if they don't, they won't be on it. It's like a simple formula.
Okay. And then, of course, anytime that something comes up, which like we'll get to later, if we need to form a subcommittee or an ad hoc subcommittee, we can do so at any time. But then is the general consensus that we should remove these items from the agenda until a specific need arises? That's all right. So I guess we'll take a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? All right. Thank you. All right, going back to the top of the list, our agenda is the Director CMAC report.
Oh.
All right, Dr. Bark. Pass this over to you.
Do I talk the whole time?
Yep.
All right. The disaster will call all meeting. It was actually it was a fairly good meeting. So from the last agenda topic, we talked about the CPAP approval. So now we can move the CPAP approval from, it was short of working its way through to it is now approved for use of the protocol at the LS level. We're still waiting on the commissioner to sign this one before it can actually be sent out there, but it did come through CMAC and through SEMSCO, and the protocol itself was approved this time. What did I put New York City EP approval for? Yeah, I know, but what did I want to talk about there?
Did you want to talk about the dose at all?
Oh, you know, I guess. They put in there a dose for their extended delirium protocol as a 10 milligram IM dose of Versed, is that correct? So it's something along the way, and the reason I guess we could bring this up would roll me into number 2 point here, that we decided to take a look at these from a different perspective. And time again, we're looking at protocols as they come through, and little minor switches and changes for protocols that have to come through the same committee, and we talk about the same stuff over and over again. So we decided to, as a committee standpoint, to say, if an ALS protocol has come through the CMAC, and it was approved through the CMAC by any region, that any other level, or any other community, or any other region that wants to adopt that protocol, either in whole or in part, can automatically do so with a vote through their WREMAC and their normal 30-day process we use to change our protocols, and a letter to the state. And that's it. So if we want to make changes to our protocol and change doses or switch things and medications around, it's already been approved by another regional protocol in the state. So at the CMAC level, we do not have to take it back to the CMAC for another approval on the 3 to 4 month mark. So that's kind of a big win for us. I know we're looking more towards going towards a collaborative protocol at this point, but there's a few things I think we wanted to make some medication suggestions and switches to, out of standing orders, or into med direction orders and vice versa, that if it exists in other state protocol, then we no longer have to take that for approval, we just have to approve it locally. That was that part. I'll get to the spinal mobilization at the end here. There's a pilot project that's been developed in Suffolk County. They're taking on other regions. I didn't see anything about their protocol for supraglottic airway devices in the BLS level. Essentially what they're looking to do is a project deployment starting with cadavers and just mannequins themselves, but putting BLS providers through cardiac arrest scenarios and removing the step of a BLS OPA and inserting that of like a King Airway type device or other things that are on the market. And it's gonna start down there in Suffolk County. They got approval to do that. They are seeking different participants around the region. We'll get a hold of the protocol. We'll just bounce back to the group and see how everybody feels about this. See if there's anybody around here that wants to jump aboard that from a training perspective. I know we do a lot with Dabra Labs too, so. They do have their meeting dates here, I guess really quickly, in May 13, 14, September 1 and 2, January 12 and 13. Of course, those are all subject to approval for a budget, so really right now we don't have a meeting. But tentatively, the next meeting will be May 13, 14. Lastly, we did adopt a position statement a while back, I think 2 meetings ago, related to narcotics delivery and the obtaining of narcotics licenses through the Bureau of Narcotics. In compliance with what we had already stated, there's some downstate disapproval, and there's some folks causing a ruckus down there that don't want to do this. Essentially, if you weren't here from this discussion before, we essentially said in the CMAC that anybody who's a CC level or higher, if you intend to provide that care, part of the standard of care is that you have benzos and you have narcotics available to say who you say you are and be able to do what you say you're going to do, and not rely on other agencies for a mutual response. We did not say that that was the level of care, and didn't support it. So we passed this through, and essentially now it's gone through the bureaucratic wheel, and there's some folks on the downstate level, particularly, it starts with an N, ends with ass off, and those that came out better than I thought. They had said that they don't want to do it. They don't want to spend the money to do it. They are refusing to do it, and they're fighting the bureaucratic wheel. We had a visit from some attorney folks telling us that they're not telling us no, but because this is a requirement for somebody to get a license, there has to be a regulation, there has to be legislation that supports it before we can enforce it. Now the good news is, from the purpose of a REMAC, if we had the decision to support this, and we did, that if the medical director in the region was not enforcing it and said they're not to, we certainly have the ability to address that person as the medical director. And furthermore, any medical director can tell their agency they're not going to practice at a certain level. That's based off of what they want to do. So there's still sort of ways to enforce this, but there's really no point where we can force people to do it until there's a legislation that says that they have to. And they're working on that. It's just going to take about a year,
So
probably.
they need to actually pass legislation before they can make
Right.
ALS people get nuts.
So we had said that that's the level of, that's the standard of care that we support, and all the medical directors agreed on this, and all of our committees agreed on it, but in order for them to actually enforce it, there has to be a regulation because it's a license that they have to obtain.
So I would assume in the meantime, they're not going to forcibly
And
hold this,
Right.
and because no one wants to pick that fight.
That's-
The legislation goes through.
that's correct.
Okay.
So we're sort of at the point where right now it's on goodwill, good gesture, and why fight with everybody? This is what has to be done, this is the right thing to be doing, but there are some people down in that county that are particularly throwing a bit of a ruckus.
But I think the important, the take-home point is, we mentioned it real quick, but an individual medical director still has the right to make a decision for their agency.
That's right.
That has
Well,
nothing to do with it.
Right now, unfortunately, the back end of that is that the individual medical director and some of the agencies that are located around that region are the ones that are refusing to do this. And they're saying that they think it's too much of a liability to put narcotics in the hands of paramedics. I don't know, those are folks that maybe get put out the pasture at some point, but the regional councils can deal with them and de-credential them as medical directors if they so choose. I bet that's a slippery slope as well, but from the state perspective, they can't enforce it until there's actual
Well,
legislation.
you also don't want to create a world where people are picking and choosing their medical directors to, until you have to it'd be
Sure.
easier to have the state change it than to try to do some enforcement of medical directors, because theoretically people would change their medical directors to get what they do.
That's correct. So the doctor's
We don't
job
want
should
that
not happen.
done.
We don't really seem to be having these issues here, thank goodness. What else? I guess we'll talk about the spinal mobilization protocol. I don't know if we addressed this last time here, but this was brought up as a position statement and a change to the BLS state spinal mobilization or selective spinal mobilization protocol. At the point it was tabled, we created a technical advisory group for the CMAC. I chaired that group. Doctors Walters and Clemency were both involved in that. And essentially what we did is we just tidied up all the language on our position statement and on the BLS protocol itself. And I am very pleased to say that that was a big win. And we passed that through committee, then CMAC, and SEMSCO with flying colors, and there was no opposition. I can give you the background on that right quick. That essentially the old protocol, the way it stood, its largest barrier was that the endpoint was full spinal mobilization. So whatever that actually meant. And in big bold letters at the bottom, it says, when in doubt, under any circumstance, fully mobilize. That really wasn't pushing the envelope to make people do the right thing. Now, we didn't really change a lot of the protocol and the way it was going to turn out. One of the things in the end that we did change is the language related to the protocol itself. And I will open it up just so I have this reference in front of me. Perfect. So at the top of the protocol, it will exist that, just to walk you through how it's supposed to be, it will say that for major trauma protocol, which is currently T6 or T7, for a blunt mechanism injury, that those patients, 100% of them have a cervical collar placed. This is pediatrics and adults. For the second set of patients, in the second grouping, it says for patients meeting adult or pediatric trauma major criteria with the penetrating mechanism of injury, or for patients not meeting the adult pediatric protocol as above, spine injury should be suspected in one of the following. And it goes through altered mental status, a complaint of neck pain, weakness, tingling since the time of the injury, deformity of the spine, a painful distracting injury, high-risk mechanisms, including axial load, high-speed motor reflexes, pedestrian or bicycle struck, and we clarified falls greater than 3 feet / 5 steps for the patient's height, because that brought together other people's protocol. Probably the biggest position of this is the next line under it, that talks about spinal mobilization fitting with a rigid cervical collar. Says that if patients without any of the above findings may be transported without the use of a cervical collar or any other means of restricted spinal mobilization or spinal motion restriction. Note, a backboard is one of multiple modalities that can be used to minimize spinal movement. Electing not to use a backboard will not constitute a deviation from the standard of care. And then furthermore, there was one more point here that was added in towards the end of it that talked about what happens if somebody's already placed on it. And the notation, we chose the language here, was when spinal mobilization restriction has been initiated and a higher level of care arrives, patients should be reassessed for spinal injury per this protocol. When possible, the highest level of care on scene will determine if spinal motion restriction is to be used or discontinued. The biggest push here was to, you can see here that nothing in here exists that says you have to put somebody on a long spine board. The push here was to make sure that we're identifying trauma, which I think we do really well, and making sure we're putting cervical collars on people that need that. Under no circumstance do we say that the long spine board is a benefit to you, and in any circumstance, it's actually a hindrance, or maybe it's going to cause some increased morbidity. In general, the language of this changed quite a bit, but it's fairly direct about what we want to happen in the end product here, and we saw great support from the state. As you can imagine, changing 40 years of core practice. Oh, by the way, I also was going to maintain that I'm quoted on this, so I'll just say it again. That I think that if you do a standing takedown, you should be a misdemeanor, you should have to spend the night in jail. And that is specifically within the language as well, about what's appropriate and what's not. In fact, if you put somebody on a KED and then put them on a longboard, you should have to go to prison for 3 to 5 years. My opinion. Anyhow.
Was that a motion?
That was a motion. Yeah, whatever. So, all things considered, this went pretty smoothly. The next step that needs to happen here is, you can imagine, to deploy this without the educational steps, which are going to be probably a 3-headed monster. The first of which is to re-inform and re-educate all of the providers that we currently have, which are several thousand, and to make sure we're doing that appropriately. We've talked about having a video, talking about narrated PowerPoints. All this is going to take a little bit of time. The next step is talking about the education through curriculum, for the BLS curriculum, through educators, that needs to be changed for everybody who's going to continue to come through New York State programs. And the third of which is going to be on all of us, is to re-educate emergency departments. Part of this packet of the spinal mobilization was a few documents to roll out, one of which was a letter that was drafted with all the citations, which there were 22 of them, on why we're actually doing this and where the science makes sense, and all the articles that support it and the position statements that support it as listed in bullets, to provide directly to emergency departments so that they'll have an understanding of why less people are going to come in on backboards. I don't think that's something that EMS providers are going to have to fight on their own. Certainly, we're going to have to advocate on everybody's behalf, but it behooves the folks that work in emergency departments, particularly physicians and nurse managers, to make sure that our staff is educated on this first. So those things will take a little bit of time. The state directly quoted us 1 to 2 years. I think that's terminally pessimistic, and I'm going to make sure that we keep this on the agenda for the May meeting so that we can bring it up again and have a direct plan. That's all I got. Anything else from the meeting, Fred?
No, I think that was a big win. I think it was something that, you and Stephanie Clemensy worked very hard on and had a lot of input, and it was a very well put together report, and took a lot of fighting at first, and then I think that there was some,
I still have bruises.
yeah, I think they gave up. And then I tried to say it'll just take us 2 years to implement it.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, Dr. Young from the Department of Health, actually there was a quote that came up in the training and education meeting that it would take 2 years to implement the spinal protocol because they were too busy with Ebola right now.
Oh, end quote. End quote, A. Johnson. I mean, starts with an A and ends with a Johnson.
Yeah. And then the next quote was that we should get them more money to do their job.
Regarding part one, I would view them with skepticism, and regarding part two, I'll gladly accept whatever money you want. Forward this way and make sure it gets to the appropriate party.
Well played. Young for president. No?
Any questions on the CMAX sub-score report or any other? Yes, Greg.
Thanks very much for doing all this, especially as an older guy who has to talk to doing all things.
You're welcome.
And in fact, I'll probably be breaking my hips on this. So do I understand now that now you're after KEs? So we taking care of that next?
Sure. So, all right, so there's people that love KEDs, and there's people that hate KEDs, and I try to ride a neutral border here. When we talked about the different immobilization techniques or otherwise, we specifically did not address vacuum splints, scoop stretchers, short boards, foldable boards, whatever type of thing, because we didn't want to specify the device in which we wanted the EMT to deliver. So when we said by means of spinal motion restriction, we're trying to design the people we want having a cervical collar, and then by design and the teaching the education, they deploy the best tool that's going to be for the job. And if the KED feels like that's the best tool for the job, they may feel under the circumstance that's it. I think we see a dwindling amount of KEDs to begin with. But all things considered, I try to give a couple of examples. The first of which is prone unconscious motorcycle guy in a ditch. I think that guy goes on a backboard. And I think all things considered, we all agree with that. 100 out of 100 times, I put that person on a backboard to extricate them. And that's the purpose of getting them out, is an extrication device. And there's many devices to extricate, and we're probably not trying to eliminate that. And furthermore, this is not a protocol that's going to be punitive to people that continue to use backward and disregard it. But we're allowing the folks to feel like their hands are tied by saying we've married the concepts of spinal mobilization that includes cervical collar and long spine board. We've divorced the concepts. And now you can use the spine board if you think it's your best tool of extrication, but I no longer need to see the, I had an elderly lady that had an ankle that was busted in the back room of her house. And the best means of getting her out of the house was on a backboard. And I probably agreed with that under the circumstances versus a top deck. But then they got out in the ambulance and said, well, she's on a backboard. We can't take her in like this. We better put a collar on her, put head blocks on her, and tape her head down. And it's the backwards mentality to say, listen, we need to unload that to allow you to use the appropriate extrication device. But putting spinal mobilization into the spinal motion restriction, understanding that the teaching needs to be fact-tracked here, that the long spine board is not an immobilization device. There's no mobilizing the spine like you would have femur. And everybody agreed on this. I didn't have any opposition to that. In fact, some of the stuff I thought was loose language that was a bit neutral. I was asked to be more aggressive on, which is why I had a few things at the bottom about taking people off when they're already put on there. And furthermore, to put a statement on there specifically that said that they meet none of this criteria, you don't have to do anything. The Vermont protocol says specifically you will not do anything. And I think that's fairly aggressive. But what we wanna do is we wanna untie that at the hands of the folks that wanna be progressive and do the right things here. I don't think this is a protocol that's gonna police people that still say, I'm gonna put everybody on the back burner because I feel it's the right thing to do. The only way to get those people is by attrition and let them just die away.
It's gonna have to modify some of the skill sheet function, or
Yes.
John's will take care of.
Well, skill sheet modification, where's Ricky? You're in here. Yeah, I think he's all over this. So, skill sheet modification, definitely, when it comes down to it, that's one of the things that we're gonna have to talk about. They also talked about the objective portion of the test, which is, no, that's the objective portion, the written portion of the test. That has to be changed with some questioning and how it's worded in there, which is, I can completely agree that going through that and not having the time to make that an agenda priority, will take some time. It doesn't mean that we're gonna stop doing this, because I think that our first big lift is educating providers who are already out there, but we wanna do that and lay the timeline the same way with educating new providers, so that there's not a big overlap of training. At the same time, we can start preparing our emergency departments immediately, because these changes have been approved, and there's really no going backwards on them.
Good job for the nurse advisory.
That'd be a great job for the nurse advisory committee. You're
We
right.
should put one of those together.
Yeah,
Josh, do you know somebody?
I think we should create a committee meeting.
So thanks for that.
You're welcome, my pleasure.
Any other questions regarding CMAC SunScore report? No. All right, we're gonna kind of get back on order here. Beth, can I have you come down when you do your report?
Sure.
And in the meantime, just real quick, two things, that I want to do. First is I want to introduce Dr. Mike Falls, who's sitting here, who is go ahead, Mike, go ahead and introduce
Yeah, Mike's off, from WCA Hospital in Jamestown, one of the medical directors in Chautauqua County and for Starflight. So happy to be here. I'm also WCA's representative to the REMAC.
Welcome.
Thank
you. Yeah, and also, we have Dr. Conley on the line joining us. Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself and your position as well?
Hey there, I'm Sarah Connolly. So I'm now serving up as medical director of most of the volunteer companies, fire companies, et cetera, in Genesee County. Strictly sector and groups. Moving on to our
Very good, thank you. And last, before we move on to our trauma advisory committee, we went out of order a little bit before. I don't know if anybody has had a chance to look at the minutes from last meeting. If there are any additions, deletions, or corrections, feel free to bring them up. Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to accept them as they are.
Motion.
All right. All in favor? All right. Moving on to the trauma advisory committee. Beth?
The Trauma Advisory Committee, information consists of, ECMC will be undergoing its ATS trauma certification verification visit, March 10th and 11th. So it's coming up quick. We discussed PCRs. We're encouraging EMS agency compliance with leaving a PCR at the hospital at the time of patient delivery. It's still a concern at times. Those who are using electronic PCRs, we're asking for a drop sheet. Our performance improvement projects, pre-notification policy ECMC from EMS is 98% for level 1 trauma through the end of June. The importance of pre-hospital notification for all hospitals and all patients was discussed. Further discussions will be held at our next meeting, discussing uniform pre-hospital report for all transports. Transfer times and destinations project, we are reviewing fourth quarter cases from 2014, looking at transfer times from outlying hospitals, including scene to the first hospital, time to request the transfer to the trauma center, and arrival at the trauma center, mode of transport, and documentation of any transport issues. We are asking all outlying community hospitals to please try to indicate in writing somewhere in their materials why the mode of transport was chosen. For example, you couldn't fly because of weather. We're just looking, 1 month later, we can't go back and say, well, why did this person come by ground? They should have been flown when it was a weather issue where there weren't any helicopters available. A transfer sheet communication form was sent to all the nurse managers in the region to help facilitate better communication with the trauma center. Regional education, ECMC is currently offering thoracic and abdominal trauma for EMS. You can contact me for that. And Betty Armenia is here today from Children's, and Karen Kelly was appointed the trauma injury prevention person at Children's, and if you want educational programs from them, they are the people to contact. Lastly, the collaborative protocols. We are looking at the collaborative protocols just from a trauma standpoint, and if we have any concerns or suggestions, we'll have them to you within 2 weeks.
Any questions on the Trauma Advisory Committee report? Thank you very much. And moving on to program agency reports. Charlotte's not here. Are you going to do the Lake Plains report?
Yes.
Let's come on down.
We just had a pretty much like change of medical director from most of the agencies in Genesee County, from Dr. Lindrose to Dr. Miley. Tiger County was a change in from the White Corners Fire Department, Dr. Martin to Dr. Pecoraro. We had some BLS nasal Narcan requests to 4 different agencies. And for trainings, a change in the AMBLS class. We have one scheduled for the end of January 31st to February 1st. That is going to be rescheduled due to the fact of low class registration. Although there's probably a football Sunday.
Scott, I'm going to have you go next, and I'll go last. Patrick, all right? Roy, check one more here.
The report was included with the agenda, so I'm just going to hit a couple of high points here. We have an EMS officer training course coming up at Elm Fire Company on Saturday, February 7th. This is the 3rd or 4th year that we've done this program. It's been very well received. The attendance registration already at this point exceeded last year's total attendance, and the registrations keep coming in. So that's actually a really good thing. We did switch the format up just a little bit this year, so even for those who have attended in the past, it might actually be a little bit different than what you've seen previously. We're going to be sending out a New Year update packet to agencies in the region that'll come out in the next couple of weeks. And the intent of this is just to make sure that we have up-to-date contact information for each of the agencies. Anyone who's ever been in an agency understands this changes 4 or 5 times a year per agency. And so it's just kind of hard to stay in front of it. And there's a number of agencies. We have pretty decent contact with all the agencies within our 2-county region. But as people change, or as agencies, their membership dwindles or grows even, we often see changes, and we need to try to stay out ahead of that. As part of that, in addition to the information page, we are going to be including a PCR submission history report for each agency. That seems to be one of the things where agencies, they're often surprised when new leadership comes in, because they think that the guy before them has been submitting PCRs, and while they did for the first 3 months, and then after that they moved on to bigger and better things, and then haven't sent anything in 6 months or a year. So this just helps to give feedback to them so that they can see where they are within their submission history. The other thing is that communication is it's key to everything. And so in this packet, we're going to be including a flyer that encourages providers to join our email listserv. And that's something that you can do right through our web page. It's been that way for a long time. But many times agencies perceive that list is intended for officers only, and it's not the case. We want all providers who are currently certified CFR paramedic, or even who might be taking an EMT class or have an interest in EMS in general. The more people we can hit with announcements and opportunities Ebola wasn't really just restricted to EMS providers, it affected everyone, so, who, could potentially come into contact. So we really want to try to grow that list, beyond the about 1,500 names that are on it at the current time. We have hired, a part-time program evaluator, with the Office of Pre-Hospital Care. His name is Mike Krupski. He is from Arnold Fire Company, and his position actually is probably going to be of particular interest to this organization, because Mike is going to be taking on the responsibility of going out and evaluating the REMAC skill preceptor, not only the preceptor program, but also the credentialing program in each of the agencies. He's going to be randomly going to agencies, known in advance, set up with the agencies in advance to go out and evaluate their programs to find out where providers are getting their training, if they actually are getting the training, where the records stand within the agencies, are they maintaining appropriate records, and the intent of this is not to be punitive. The intent is to get real-time feedback from all of the agencies in the field so that we can help bring information back to this organization in case we need adjustments within the policy, or we find out that things are not feasible, or that we need to do something a little bit differently. And so he's going to be doing that and then following up and providing after-action reports to these agencies, just like we do with agency pre-inspections. If we go out and find that an agency is deficient on something, we can give them an after-action report with suggestions on how to correct it. And again, this is not designed to be punitive. Certainly, if we find things that are glaring, we will certainly bring it to the attention of appropriate individuals. But our role at this point is just to get a sense of how things have been going now that we're into the third year of this policy, and get some real-time feedback to this organization so you can expect to see things in the future. And to rip a page out of Donna's book, one of the other things that he's going to be doing is setting up sort of regional testing sites. They call them skill fairs in the Southwestern region. We're going to start doing the same thing just to give providers another opportunity in case they don't have access to preceptors, or they feel that they couldn't make a training on a particular night at their own agency. It gives them another opportunity and a venue to do this. And you can expect to see information on that coming out in the near future. A quick note unrelated to my role as a program agency, but with regard to course sponsors throughout Western New York who send students to the Erie County Medical Center, either for observation time or for the advanced level programs, who
Verizon Wireless, the wireless customer you called is not available at this time. Please try your call again later. Announcement 1 6 4 1 6 0 -5.
okay.
Verizon Wireless, the wireless customer you called is not available at this time. Please try your call again later. Announcement 1 6 4 1 6 0
So we
-5.
need everybody to call that in.
I will go back.
Okay. Last thing. So if any of the course sponsors who send students to the Erie County Medical Center, we really need to get a sense of students who are coming in and making sure that their time is scheduled. And just as importantly, we have to make sure that your course sponsor has a clinical affiliation agreement with the Erie County Medical Center, and that students have ID badges, they have their flu shots, or they've signed the waiver and know that they have to wear a mask, that they have their PPDs. I just want to try to spread the word so that if you have course sponsors in your region, I've had a number of course sponsors who I get calls from students saying, I'm going to come up and do clinical time, and we can't do that because in a number of these cases there is not an affiliation agreement that's in place. And so please help me to spread the word to the programs in your area that we need to have students scheduled and that we need ID badges for everyone, and that's EMT all the way up through paramedic programs. So.
Who's the contact, Scott?
I will be the point of contact for that.
That's it. Just to go back, because you were talking about the PPAs before, Donna, you want to address some of the concerns that come up about PPAs and how to document that maybe we should
Yeah, I
discuss
mean,
here?
from my understanding, our responsibility was that each year, every provider was to fill out a new PPA. And on top of that, a new skill sheet. I'm getting complaints that they're being told that in other areas, they do not have to do that, that they get an Excel spreadsheet and somebody signs off for everyone. So that's why I came to you, because I am getting a lot of slack that my people don't want to do it because they're not having to do it in other areas. I personally, believe we should do something. I've actually spoken to people down in my area, and I would prefer to combine them because we do not get the skill sheets. And we've had issues where agencies like to tattletale. I had an agency that called to say that another agency did not use a REMAC approved preceptor. So I called, and they did not use a REMAC approved preceptor, but I would not know that if they didn't get tattletaled on because I don't get the skill sheets. That being said, these people then had to do all their skills again. And they agreed they should. So I guess there's twofold there. One, are other places not having to do the PPAs every year? And then my second question is it possible to combine, if they've done a PPA in the past, take the PPA and marry it with a skill sheet so we have one document that they can turn in and that we can verify? Because our goal was to use REMAC approved preceptors. Again, how do we know that if we're not seeing who signs off?
I'll speak to Wyoming area region. What we came up with was, I guess I would refer back to, I don't see John Malachuk here, but he was a very integral part of that discussion. Filling out a PPA every year, to me, I don't believe that was in what the spirit of the policy was to have it happen. But we do need a census every year of who the providers are. You should only have to complete a PPA if there is a change in your level of care, which should occur at the time of that change before you go online. And also, if you have a new provider who comes into your agency. Remember what the intent of the PPA is: to protect the medical director and also protect the agency from providers who have done egregious things and are coming into agencies. Having someone that is previously registered in a region with an agency that has no change fill out a form that they filled out last year, it's just seems like it's moving a lot of paperwork for really no benefit. And at the end of the day, the only people that it bogs down more are the program agencies, even more so than the agencies, unless it's a larger provider-based agency. It to me doesn't make sense. And as part of that discussion, what we had agreed to, and this is what John was a part of, what we had agreed to is that we would accept an Excel spreadsheet that would list the providers who were still active in the agencies, their level of care, their certification, all of their expiration dates for all of their alphabet soup classes that they were required to have by a region, and then the date that they completed their skills. Even if somebody submitted a skill sheet to us, I frankly don't have the time, and neither does Karen, to go through 2,500 skill sheets, because that's the number of providers that we have in our two-county region, to verify that everybody has taken their skills with the skill preceptor. Now, in turn, I guess my answer to that is that's what Mike's responsibility is going to be when he goes out to these agencies and looks at their files to ensure that the training was in fact completed by a skill preceptor, and then to report back when things were not done and the reason why. Certainly, our method was not done in any way to try to create a headache for any other region. But I do think that even though we're one REMAC, we're three different regions, our systems are very different within the three regions, and I think we sort of have to acknowledge that if it works for your region, it might not work for mine, and vice versa with something else. And I think providers and agencies in your region probably have to accept the fact that if I live in this county and this county falls in this region, these are the rules. And I think it's just an interpretation of the policy, but it wasn't done to, you know, create havoc.
So here's my take on it, is that we created this policy so that we would have standard across all 8 counties in the whole region, right? I don't care what the policy is, but I think that we should have standardization. So, and I agree that, you know, we have to look at what the actual intent is here. If you actually read the PPA forms, I have it in front of me here, it basically asks your New York State certification number, the date of your orientation with the agency, the date of your last skills completion, your WREMAC protocol exam, and then CPR, trauma life support, pediatric life support, cardiac life support course data. So whether that information gets put on this form or whether it gets put in a spreadsheet, I don't have a personal opinion, as long as we get that information every year. Hang on, I'm getting there. I guess the other question is, and there's a few other questions on there, has your medical command ever been restricted here or there? Is that, these other questions here that need to be asked every so many years? Is it every certification date, every recertification date? Or is it just you answer them once, if you never change levels, never change agencies, you never have to answer it again?
Well, if we follow that other part of the policy, our provider restriction policy, which was subsequent to credentialing and CME, when a provider is taken offline, that is supposed to be reported to the program agency. In fact, it would have occurred at the November meeting, but it's occurring here. So that information is already being housed by the program agencies, and so we would know that. And that's what those 3 questions intend to do, is to, you know, protect.
Right.
My concern is pencil whipping. If someone doesn't have to sign something that document is accurate, I could say your certification is March 15th and yours is, you know, and that is what has happened in the past. We get these spreadsheets that someone just goes through and makes up, and, oh, well, that person left, so we're not responsible for it. So that's my true concern, is having people have to sign things, give them an accountability and a responsibility to ensure their skills are done, their cards are up to date. I can't tell you, when we did our skill fairs, how many people whipped out their CPR cards. I got a card, it's been expired for a year.
And they knew they had to have it done.
You know, and so, I don't know. I mean, I can see both sides, and it is a lot of work, and I have books this big on my desk,
So
but
do we want every agency and every provider turning in their skill sheet to the program agency? I guess that's the other question, right? Or do we have them keep it internally like they do now? What's the best way to standardize? I think it should be standard across the board for all regions, and I don't have a right or wrong answer, so.
Well, I'll have a very unpopular but related opinion to this, but I think this policy is already too big to manage right now. I frankly, BLS providers, it's a lot. I think if I could take a mulligan on this, as somebody who was part of the original group, I think we should have started with advanced providers, because they're the ones that are really kind of the greatest threat to the patients, you know, kind of general, and really what this organization has direct oversight responsibility toward is the ALS skills. I think we should have probably implemented this for ALS providers initially, and then once we got that into a well-oiled machine, we could have rolled it out to BLS providers. And I think if we ask for all of this information, is where I'm going with this, we're just going to get bounds and bounds of paperwork that it's creating busy work that isn't changing what we're doing, that we get with one sheet out of a spreadsheet that has people's names. And if we get somebody who tattletales, or our evaluator goes out and discovers that something happened, then I think the REMAC and the agency's medical director should get the stick out and take it to the agency and say, no, you betrayed that trust, and now you're offline.
So
I tend to like the idea of audits. It's an efficient way to
ensure compliance.
Go, Brian.
I'm, just as a reference to audits and large numbers of data and everything, there are states that even with their recertification of their actual paramedic license / certification, whatever the state is, don't check the providers, but randomly do audits on people, right? And that's just because it's more efficient for the state to manage that. So if states think that actual certification and cards can be followed on audits, why can't we use an audit system?
Brian?
I mean, like a spreadsheet with an audit, that's fine.
Issues you're going to confront, turn of course to the policy with confronting this, and I just looked up the policy really quick while you guys were addressing it. But the policy number 1 places the onus for ensuring compliance on the agency, not the program agency, but the agency. Number 2 requires the agency maintain documentation, not submit documentation, maintain documentation. Number 3, the last paragraph on that page says, by August 1st of each year, all agencies shall submit a list of online providers in a format acceptable to the EMS program agency. So it sounds by policy, each program agency can define its own format. And finally, the question about whether PPAs have to be submitted annually. The last sentence says we're encouraged to have each of its providers complete a REMAC PPA annually. So it's already addressed in the policy that the PPAs are expected annually.
So, you're correct in all this. Thank you.
Reading comprehension 101.
Very good. No wonder you're CEO.
Next week, kind of shoot.
So I guess the question is, I mean, we have the policy, we could obviously amend or change however we see fit. The question is, it does say, in a format acceptable to the program agency, it does say attachment 2, I believe. It actually does define that form. I guess the question is that if we accept a spreadsheet, should that spreadsheet have to be signed off on, if that's what we want to move to? Should it have to be signed off on whoever their REMAC approved preceptor was, who signed them off for the agency, as well as the medical director, and or anyone else, Brian?
To your point about attachment 2, that's just a list of the program agencies. It's not a defined form.
Oh, I was just reading the policy. All right.
Yeah, you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
But I'll answer for us, yes, somebody has to be accountable. A signature from somebody at the agency would be valuable.
Yeah, I think that's an easy thing. Put the ownership on the agency themselves. They have to sign it saying that this is true and correct to the best of their knowledge. Done.
Donna?
I mean, I guess maybe it's just because I've seen, and you've seen, we've done skill fairs, and we have advanced providers that fail CPR. We have advanced providers that can't do mega codes. And we had people tell us they've never done their skills in 20 years. They actually told us that. So, I mean, I personally feel putting some kind of rule, regulations, having REMAC approved preceptors has done us well, at least in the southern tier. My concern is if we go back to little spreadsheets and someone signs off, no one's going to do them anymore, and we're going to go right back to where we were before.
Well, they do the spreadsheet, they have to turn in the spreadsheet, they still have to do it.
They supposedly turned in a spreadsheet before, too. 3 years ago.
I mean, I guess my question is, if they turn in a spreadsheet that has all the same information, or they turn on an individual PPA for each person that has all the same information on it, if you're getting the same information, what is the difference in the format things?
It doesn't.
Are you hung up on the legal attestation piece on the PPAs?
Yes, because that, to me, makes people accountable. There were a lot of people who did not do their skills till the last minute. And then when they were told they had to sign a piece of paper, then they did their skills.
Can the PPAs go to the agency director, so they deal with that stack of paperwork, and then the agency director forwards on a
The ripple
spreadsheet
effect
to
is massive on this stuff. I mean, it was just a year ago that we were sitting here and these forms were due to, and again, I'm only speaking for my region, and Donna had great success with this. Wyoming area, we just did, it's just that we have a ton of BLSFR agencies that probably most of them don't even want to do EMS, but they, there's reasons why they carry that code. And it's just like trying to get blood from a stone. And we were talking that in November we had agencies that had submitted their PPAs that were due August 1st, and we had contacted these places and reached out, and it just continues to ripple and ripple and ripple, and I can't imagine having to go through that every year. And even with the spreadsheet, I mean, we had the same fight, but at least we're not trying to get all these individual pieces of paper. We're getting, at least a spreadsheet, and I don't have any problem with that.
No, at the end of the day, I mean, I think that we set a standard, we have to have a standard, hold people accountable, make sure that they can, it's our responsibility to make sure that they can do their skills as medical directors and as REMAC. So we have to have some type of mechanism to do that.
But I think the intention, if we go back to when we argued about this already, we've already gone through this whole thing once. The intention of the way we worded it was that regionally, we agreed we needed this information, and we needed to have preceptors, and it needed to be done. But how each region dealt, each agency, program agency within the region dealt with it would be based off of their capabilities and number of providers and what was easiest and best for them. I agree, if you want to do it your style because you can manage it and that works well for you, you should be able to do that. And as long as there's some ownership to it. What?
I had 100% compliance.
Yeah, and
by the due date.
Again, I agree, but I think each area is different, the number of providers is different, the number of agencies is different, I don't know why we have to rehash the policy. It's already written
We
that
haven't heard
whatever.
from Big Lakes yet either, I don't know if they may do something different.
We've been pretty much doing it the same way as you, Scott. If they send us the PPAs, that's fine, or send a spreadsheet of all their expiration dates, and they have like whoever the EMS captain is at the bottom, say that their skills has been done. Sometimes we get their skill sheets. Wasn't a requirement that they send them to us.
Are we actually talking about a problem with them getting done or managing the paperwork on the back end?
My opinion is getting them done.
I mean, maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but don't we expect that if we forced this last year and said there was an absolute deadline and really put our foot down, then most agencies are preparing to do it again this year?
There were several that did not do that.
So it's not a new policy, but
No.
our level of command and control over it the first time was how serious are these guys going to be, right?
Yeah.
And then when we put our foot down and said we're very serious about it, and furthermore you're going to get it done, or you're lose your agency privileges, your provider privileges. We saw the results. I had a couple agencies that were resistant at front as well, and they're already working towards a plan of making sure they're going to be done again by this upcoming summer deadline. And it's within their plan to get them done as part of their educational program now. And it just becomes one other thing that they're going to prepare to do. It's probably on our direction to make sure that it's going to be done with some reminders and just making a decision of this is how we continue to want it to be presented and collected as information.
Brian, first of that.
Just following up, I think audits are perfectly appropriate and a nice solution to what Don is presenting. If you have, if I'm signing for towards the ambulance saying we did our skills and every single person here was verified by a REMAC credential preceptor, coming to audit that and testing it with 10 or 15 people is not only appropriate but consistent with every other practice in the industry. And then a failure would default to something similar, I think, to what New York State does, statement of deficiency, a plan of correction, and then subsequent action by this body.
Okay.
Yeah, in addition to what he's saying, I think you've got a small group in the sense of REMAC approved preceptors. Would there be a way or a mechanism that you could have them provide a list up to the program agencies that we did? We verified the skills on these people. I don't know if there's an easy way for them to, they're the ones that are approving it. It's another layer, I know, but it's also a cross verification that, wait a minute, you've got 50 preceptors, I don't know, is there a way for them to provide a list of the program agency of who they verified the skills on, in addition to whatever you decide on the front end? Just kind of.
So I think no matter what we do, you're always going to have somebody who tries to cheat or game the system, right? We can only babysit them so much. But the question is, do we want to have one standard spreadsheet reporting across the entire REMAC going forward, or do we want to allow some of our agencies to do it different? I guess that's the first question. And the second question is, if we do want to do that, then I think we need to have some subcommittee or group working on it. If we want to form some type of standard form, whose signature goes on it, etc.
I think it's clear that what works for one program agency doesn't work for another, and so I said, just we have a policy in place, keep it the same, and if the program agencies want to do audits or whatnot, and then if someone's non-compliant, come to us and we'll bring the hammer down hard and end the story.
Isn't that also the medical director's responsibility to oversee those?
I just think this is not a REMAC issue.
Yes, it is. It is ultimately the medical director's
So it's hard to standardize people who have different medical directors that are doing things. a little different.
I think non-compliance and or cheating the system, giving the system is completely down to the agency, and that's where audits come into play. I know audits are take a lot of time and energy, I get that, but the threat of audit, and hopefully people just being professional should be incentive enough to do this, but
Now,
if someone doesn't and they end up coming before this body and we have to deal with it, then we'll deal with it progressively.
Tim?
I would say if you stick with the regional between, because they will provide requirements.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Just that remove that last line of requiring the submission of the EPA, because we have a policy out there that's not being followed, it's just.
it says encourage though, but it's not required. It's encouraged to complete a PPA every year.
So it says here, I'll read it. It says the agency shall ensure that each provider meets the minimum didactic and skill requirements set forth for this policy as outlined in items 1, 2, and 3, that defines the PPA requirements on an annual basis. It doesn't say that they have to actually submit another PPA. Donna?
All I ask is that we all get held the same, that everybody shows up here on whatever day we're supposed to have it here, September 1st, and everybody has done their skills. Because my problem is, we enforce it. We hit it hard. You know, you've been to skills fair. I mean, I drag you guys all over the place. My problem is, and no offense to Lake Plains, but there are people that tell me they did not do their skills. And then they come down and they tell, you know, why do we gotta do it? They don't gotta do it there. You know, all I ask is that we all get treated the same, and that we all have to do the same thing, and that if they don't do it, that there's consequences.
Can we work toward, I'm not sure. Can we work toward establishing an absolute, an advanced directive, I guess, from this organization to the program agencies that says when you come to, you know, you provide your report at the September REMAC meeting, any agency that has not submitted to you, not promised, not saying the check's in the mail, not any of that stuff, that has not delivered their report to you, and that only the people who are on those reports, that you are to immediately take them offline effective September 1st, and then at the September REMAC meeting, you are, that we will determine the course by which they will go back online.
It's actually August 1st.
Right, but, well, right, they have to report it by August, and fine, make it August 1st, then whatever you want to do. But I think you're looking for the teeth.
I am. I'm not gonna lie, because if I have no teeth, no one's gonna do it.
I don't disagree. I think we can all share that pain.
Didn't we, this is getting painful. Didn't we argue this
Yeah.
already, and haven't we had several meetings? The idea of the teeth, and then we brought up like the medical, all the docs up here tried to get aggressive, and then everyone told us to back down and send just like nice letters to people, and then you had to give them 30 days in the next meeting, and felt, we've done this at multiple meetings. I have like, sorry, I get very impatient about these things. Like, so which is it? Do we want to have teeth in this, or do we want to like take the lackadaisical approach we were told to do last time, which is give like 6 letters of one and then find out what
I think the policy's there.
So which one is it gonna be?
Like the chiclet teeth?
No, I want real teeth. I want like.
You know what I'm saying? Like we were told
Wax
last time
teeth.
where Josh Lynch was here, we were talking and we wouldn't give him like, 12 hours notice and pretty much send him a nasty gram letter, and then we were told not to do that, give him time to.
But I think we need a protocol as a program agency, because we're sort of the, John was free, we're the enforcement piece of this.
I agree, but we were trying to be aggressive
Right.
last time, we were told not to, and now I have you guys coming back and asking us to be aggressive, so which is it?
So
Aggressive or lenient?
Here's my suggestion.
Pick one.
I think we can go round and round for a long time. I think that we all somewhat agree and have some little different flavors to what we're doing, but can we ask the 3 program agencies to discuss this between now and the next meeting and talk about if we should have the same reporting or different reporting in the different regions going forward, and also if you have a suggestion for a policy of how you would like even just a memo to come out as far as it will be enforced on this date to this extent by the next meeting. Is that fair?
But don't we already have that? I mean,
It says that you have to do it, it doesn't say what we're going to do necessarily if you don't. The assumption, I think, is that it's in there and that we would enforce it and you come offline immediately. I think if we want to put out a memo ahead of time saying if it is not done, this is it. And if you are willing to draft a letter together, the 3 of you, by the next meeting, I would entertain that, support it. So that we can move on with the rest of the agenda.
I'll have to tomorrow.
All right, but can we collaborate on that?
Absolutely.
Very good. Oh goodness, we're almost through the program agency reports. No, just then.
Almost.
And, yes, and so Donna has graciously asked that we accept her STEM report in writing and not go through it verbatim, and so that she could address something
I'm like,
more important.
It's just a sleep.
Yeah, once I tell you.
Is Henry on the phone still?
Yeah.
Dr. Walters put that video up, dancing in the pool.
I don't think he heard you. Henry, Todd said that we're just showing the video of you dancing in the pool right now.
Don't hide, I got a free plan.
Nice Speedo, by the way.
Oh my god.
You know, you only have to wear your floaties in the deep end.
Well, as this goes up, most of you know the REMAC.
Done.
Do you want me to do it over there? How am I gonna do this?
I'll bring it over there.
Go over there.
You want to remember what?
Just yell like you're talking to your
It's
kids.
a webpage, so it's not.
So don't
but I can
cut
tell
it
you to go to
directly.
If it comes up.
I'm already confused.
Well, you've got 4 minutes and 50 seconds, we're going to close.
All right, here we go. So the current REMAC website is very hard to navigate. We are, part of our program agency responsibility was to coordinate the REMAC website. And right now, we kind of have programmer, and if you click on that, oh, we had it.
Why do I have to be eating?
I only have this picture, and that's one of my defaults, new
Because-
site suggestions. This is a beta site, this is not live.
I think a picture of Reisner on there.
So if you look at the other REMAX site, if you just want to click on that right now at the top. Yeah, it's just REMAX, oh, way over there.
Sorry, I can't see what you're saying.
Oh.
Okay. Now I get-
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No, you
Yeah, I get the rewind.
No, I wanted the other website. I don't think, never mind. All right, so this is what it looks like currently. It's very hard to navigate. Anytime you guys send us something, we actually have to send it to our programmer. The programmer actually has to put it on, and half the time he doesn't put it where we need it. So if you go back to the new REMAC website, which is beta, and I'm making this known, new site suggestions, that's what we want. This is not live. If you click on that, it will bring up a box where you can send us your comments, your questions, your concerns. We do want photos. Most of these photos will be ours because that's all we had. And this is honestly myself, Jen, and one of our interns crack at doing a website. So I, ask that you be nice to us because we are not website people. So this is going to be the beginning page. I think you can scroll down a little. We talk a little bit about what we are. We made a new logo for REMAC. Again, take it if you want, and if you don't have to, if you don't. So then if you go to the top, under REMAC, we have several tabs. So under information, click on that. What we try to do is we try to put everything where we go. So we have protocols, information is the minutes, the forms, all the minutes are on there, all the forms are on there, all the bylaws are on there, all the policies are on there. If you hit REMAC again, go to membership, and this is a page that we're working on. What we'd like to do, and I don't know why it's not downloading that picture, it took me so long to get. What we'd like to do, isn't it?
Wow, he was good at it.
He's dashing, isn't he? And I even left a place for chair-elect, if you see.
I didn't know that Ralph Lauren made lab coats.
No. And then if you scroll down a little, what we're planning on doing is having the membership be by each area. And these were just fillers right now. So that, the ones that represent the Big Lakes area, the ones that represent Southwestern, they might necessarily look like this, but if you click on, if you want to click on one, it then tells you who's representing, each hospital and which person represents it. Go back to REMAC again, and again, there's a lot in this, and I put the site name on my report because it is a beta site, so you can't get to it directly. Agency codes are just agency codes. If you go to skill evaluator resources, this is something we get lots of calls on. So everything is here in a nice PDF format, CFR, EMTs, you know, all the summary forms, the provider privilege application, the skill evaluations. Again, all this can be changed, but now Jen and I can get to this very quickly and change it very quickly. Let's go back to the top. Under WREMAC, I think I hit most of those. So then if you go to councils, I put a link to each council. So if you click on that, it would go directly to each council. If you go to program agency, again, a link to each program agency. Links. We try to put the ones that normally people are looking for. Department of Health, Article 30, Part 800 policies. Under events, this is something I'm hoping we'll utilize more. What we'd like to do is give each program agency and the chair access to this. This is mostly ours, and I think Jen did send out an email to you guys asking. But our hope is that we can list things on this that we're doing as a region. So even individually, you know, I had the WREMAC meeting on there. We're doing a AED course on the 24th. We have our QA/QI class on the 27th. So if you click on them, it gives you a little bit more information. But again, we're just trying to find ways to really get some more, you know, information out there quickly. And then under more is kind of for me to, you know, contact us, but then for you guys to get back to us. Kind of left space because there might be other things you want. Again, we try to convert everything from the old site to the new site in a clean format. I know there was a couple things I never could find, like the diabetes PowerPoint, so there probably are some things that we might have to scrub out and find. But again, we really want your input. We want this to be your site. So we can change things pretty quickly. If you go back to the main page again, and remap. If you click on new suggestions, it's actually going to bring up, it'll go directly to our STEMS email. You can just send us something at stems@fix.org also. If you want to share this with your other employees and have them make suggestions, and then as soon as you guys are comfortable with this, I will convert this to be live to your live WREMAC site. So again, this is yours. I am not a website creator, but hopefully it's a little better. Questions?
No, I think that there were some things on the old website that was hard to find, some of the policies, some of the forms, some of the memos that weren't on there. And I think you guys have most of them listed on your website. Can you make sure that all the forms are?
They should be all there now.
Are they all there now?
Yeah, if you go to WREMAC policies, there's a big old.
That was the one thing that I didn't like, is that it was different policies and things there. But
I think that's why, because it was always, you had to know to go under information and then go under policies.
Right.
And again, I can change it, but it's under information, and then there's the WREMAC minutes, the forms, the bylaws.
highlight WREMAC again, just so I can see the drop-down choices.
I would change it to policies.
Yeah, instead of information, maybe we can make it different one for policies.
Go to information and policy.
And again, that's, you know, you guys let us know, we'll move it around. We tried, there's a lot there, there's minutes, there's forms, there's bylaws, so what do you call that to? If not, we would have a drop sheet like this, so that's why we were trying to figure out a way to encapsulate things. Now, for me at least, it'll be easier when someone calls, I can always say, go to information, you know, go to policies, but I am willing to change it. I just need names, ideas, thoughts, and again, I don't want to make it too long, because then people tend not to look at it.
When we roll out the skills protocol training, didn't we have testing embedded in that WREMAC site as well?
Yep.
And will we have that capability with this?
With protocols?
Right, when we do a new protocol rollout?
No, because the goal is to go to the statewide collaborative, which they would have their own protocol rollout. Which we're going to hopefully go to the statewide protocol soon.
They're not statewide protocols, they're collaborative
Collaborative
protocols.
protocol, sorry.
So the current ability to test via the protocol test will no longer exist.
Once we switch out, yes.
But if we hosted a test on a separate site or server, we could have a link to it right there.
We could, I mean,
So the discussion, and I'll just kind of talk about it right here, when we met in Albany at the CMAC, we met with our collaboratives group in that as well. The timeframe for the rollout of the collaboratives is actually going to be, trying to get everything kind of updated and working out all the little, discrepancies between the different regions. So right now, the way it sits is that the goal is to get everything pretty much done by September, however, not actually rolling them out until after the next AHA update, which will be in November, so that the final revised edition of the collaborative protocol will be approved at the January CMAC, January of next year, essentially a year from now.
Which means that for PPAs and stuff, people still need to do that.
So you're
I'm just saying all new people, everyone coming out, still gonna be taking our test.
up until that point, yes.
So we'd still need that link then in the new REMAC site, off the old site to take the test.
The other thing then with that is, there was discussion about when all these regions adopt the collaborative protocols, how to do a joint unified rollout, because it's gonna be, some things different every state. And right now, the plan is to have physicians from each region, depending on what, we've kind of divided up the different protocols and who's responsible for what, who's working on what, even though we all kind of come back and oversee it all or approve it all at the end. So the way it's going to be done is hopefully it will be in some type of a podcast, probably like an hour-long thing that will be done by multiple doctors from all across the region, kind of highlighting all the specific changes or major changes in each protocol, and then having a unified type test or rollout so it's consistent across all the collaborative groups, so we wouldn't necessarily have to reinvent our own thing. And I would think it'd be very easy to then put that on this site, or link to it on this site.
Is there a search engine in that, Donna?
not at this point because it's not live, but there will be.
Okay.
It's hard to see because there's just a big picture of your head right in the middle, Henry. You can't see it, but we can.
You look very tan too.
Yeah.
Is there a way we could update the forms as well, like the change in medical director, because we've been getting a lot of lost mail. A lot of people have been trying to do medical director change, and it's still the old office of ours. We're on some of those forms on the REMAC website.
No, that should all be updated. That's been, if you can point to specific things, but we.
Medical director change, it's still the old form with 56 Harvester on there. You go right onto the website. Yeah.
Again, if no one gives us the information, we can't change it. We're not mind readers. I mean, so no one has told me that we needed to.
Okay, I see that. That's actually the one that just got updated yesterday. That's the one that I just did yesterday. If you scroll to it, the third page, I think it's in there. So around there, it has your current.
Okay.
That's yesterday.
It would have been, well, because the one that downloaded from the site was the old one, but it has your.
Is this the right address?
That's the right one, yeah.
Yes.
All right.
I think this is great. Thank you. Where's this new logo that you're speaking of, and can I get it in a Velcro patch?
Oh, you guys need a Velcro patch.
Does it come in seduce and color?
You're getting a technical flavor.
There you go.
OD green?
We tried.
All right.
We have a bunch of girls, so I was really kind of worried that it was too girly, so we did go with the blue.
Joel takes some pink ones for his daughters too.
That's right. Can we get the Disney on Ice version, please?
No, I think this is great. I think that's something that's kind of bothered a lot of us for the last few years. Thank you very much for doing this. And if anyone has any suggestions on drop-down menus, how to organize the links and stuff, then please let Donna know. And you said that we can get to that site if we follow the link in your
Yeah,
report?
it's I think on page 2 or 3.
REMAC.weebly.com.
You got to do the HHTP.
Donna, could you do this? Because I know it's in your report, but could you send that out to maybe Karen, or Karen just email it out to everybody so that everybody knows where it is, and we can, without having to go through the minutes, if you don't mind? Great. All right, thank you very much. Moving on, we're going to go through I'm going to skip through this ALS protocols. I know we just talked about the collaborators, and there's some other things that are going to come up under new business. But then continuing on under subcommittee reports to QI, Dr. Kenyon,
My only question was, there was the issue with Great Valley,
Little Valley.
Little Valley, one of the valleys, and I've not yet, I don't know the plan for, was gonna review their PCRs, and I wasn't sure what,
Do you want them emailed or?
whatever, I just didn't know what was the kind of final part of that puzzle.
Give me your email afterwards.
Sure.
Where we can talk about it offline,
Yeah.
I'll make sure that they
Yep.
start giving those to you. All right.
And I
Anything
don't
else
know
about these?
No, I don't know what this is in reference to, this other thing here. This
I-
provider's take it offline.
I have a QI question before we move on to that topic, whoever's gonna bring that up. And with the regional and as a body here, one thing on a QI perspective is that some people do it really well, some people do it really poorly, and everybody else doesn't do it. Should it be on us, and through this use of a website or otherwise, to develop what we determine as appropriate QA tools? And the tools of, let's look at this from the same consistent perspective, say you want to review PCRs on STEMIs, or cardiac arrests, or strokes, or trauma, and have the same objective data in which any person can pull over a PCR and look for the stuff that's going to be important from a QI perspective, as an informational tool to provide to agencies. Because I've tried to create this from start, I can't necessarily find it. There are some websites out in California that publish them, and I'd like to steal them. But I'd be willing to help. It's something with, that the body otherwise thinks is it. Yes, plagiarize, that's exactly what I thought.
So I think
It's just an idea of getting, I think that's definitely one of the things, and when we talk about even moving towards a collaborative protocol, that we will have less emphasis from a year-to-year basis on updating our protocols, and then we have to refocus our emphasis, and it's probably gonna be back on QA and education, where it should be, which is the responsibility of this body as a primary concern. But a QA tool is a link to something you can download and use in part of your agency. I think it would be nice to have the guidance from this body.
And I think historically with projects, that's what we've done, is just give them guidance and their templates. I think that's a good use of time and resources.
I think that there was some discussion a couple meetings ago about, Scott, what you had kind of organized in your region about doing kind of a standardized or a regional, did you do a countywide or regional?
No, it was agency-specific region. So, North Collins, Eden, Farnham, and Gowanda were one, they just met last night. The town of Hamburg is now the second one to get off the ground, and that's all 9 companies, I think, under Hamburg Fire. Awesome.
Okay. And Donna, you have something coming up too?
Yeah, we're actually doing a kind of a basic QA/QI, and then most of our agencies were very fortunate on our EMS charts, which has a phenomenal QA/QI program that you can utilize as a medical director. So our goal is to review that with a lot of the agencies, and then we're setting up training sessions with the medical directors to be able to use it. Totally plagiarizing off Dr. Davidoff. He is the one that, kind of clued me in on this. He actually showed me, he gets little alerts on his phone.
That's
So
That actually works great.
Jack wouldn't mind.
another reason why electronic and having one platform, and I know I sound like a broken record, is so important. I mean, you can attest, you've been somewhat trained.
Yeah, it's, when I log into EMS charts, I'll have an inbox with all my QA flags. And I've been setting those up individually with the agencies, but, having a standard would be nice.
I think that
Trying to achieve consistency throughout all the agencies, a lot easier to keep track of, but it's really nice, I can just do the charts, send feedback back to the providers, it's great.
So I think for a lot of our volunteer smaller agencies, it's very difficult for them to do their own internal QI every month, or they're just not doing it, which I think is unfortunately what's happening with a lot, even though they're required to. And so, I think we had discussed, should we try to facilitate, and I think maybe this is probably more of a program agency or a regional thing of trying to establish, like Scott's done, some of these regional QI groups or local QI groups to kind of help everybody meet those requirements. I don't know if it's I think if you do it as a program agency like regional council, it's almost too big. I don't know if county is even probably too big, but some of that probably should be discussed throughout the different regions. I don't know that we need to do anything from a REMAC level, so I think it'd be too large to do across, other than to put the forms and things out there, but does anyone else have any other?
I think the goal should be to give people
tools to use, because it is hard to sometimes think of stuff on, yeah,
Right.
resources and,
Yeah.
you know, or ideas like this, you know, quarter do this or this quarter do that, that should maybe be the goal rather than
I think putting the forms out there and the tools to use, I think is good, but I think we should still encourage the regions to develop some type of regional QI type groups if they aren't able to do it on their own.
Have this right?
I don't wanna point out the 10,000-pound gorilla in the room, but funding is where we need to be speaking about. Funding will make QA, QI happen, and that's the bottom line. We can try to think outside the box and talk about new and creative tools and techniques to encourage QA and QI, but until it's funded, it's not getting done.
I mean, a couple agencies I work with have full-time paid people, and it's still hard to get them to do a decent job. And even if they're reviewing every chart and looking for things that are useful for, you know, be it billing or just the stuff the state requires, then to get inside the second part of it to actually make useful data come out of it, which is great. EPCR, we can yank stuff out.
Yeah, and that's a great tool, EPCR, that electronic platform certainly makes it doable for a reasonable cost. Now, I think we may need to go back to our councils and say, hey, can you throw a little something our way so we can encourage a QA, QI program?
Well, as a program agency, we pay $2,000 a year to allow you guys to have access to the.
EMS trusts. So just so I'm clear on what you're suggesting, Todd, you're talking about the program agencies providing funding for what specifically?
No, I'm talking about our councils throwing a little bit of money towards their program agencies so they can have some revenue stream to kind of roll out or help these volunteer squads. Like Knapp's Creek comes to mind, tiny little agency up the hill. They might do 40 calls a year. You know, so I don't think they have a robust QI program.
And that's exactly why I think it's important that we kind of try and develop these on a local, regional type level, but I think that that's something that needs to be brought up at the individual regional councils as far as if they would approve funding for the program agencies to do something like that, because it really is up to each individual regional council. Scott?
Yeah, I'm getting a little heartburned. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that I believe the REMAC, I don't know that you have a specific set of deliverables, but sort of through the program agencies, we do have a QI component in our contracts, which says that we're supposed to do, in conjunction with the REMAC, at least one annual QI topic. And I know we've done this in the past, and I don't remember what they were. It all blends together at some point. But I do think that it is important that, especially from the REMAC, which probably one of the biggest roles of the REMAC is to ensure quality and patient safety, is that we should have some type of an 8-county-wide QI project each year that we do. And while we might have these little pockets that take place in Wyoming, Erie, and Southwestern, in Big Lakes, I think it's important for this organization to have one topic. It doesn't have to be a mammoth lift, but I think we have to have something that we can just sort of point to that evaluates our system and the quality of care that we provide.
I think that those are two separate things. Having one REMAC-wide QI topic at some point during the year is one thing. Having each agency do their monthly QI like they're required to,
Right.
I think is the other issue. So.
Because I'm sure Ed will tell you when he goes in and inspects, he'll ask for the QI, and they're like, oh, here's stems. You know, they use our project as, and he's like, no, that's not, you know.
And that was the intent of our little pockets, is because that actually is the agencies participating, and we're not trying to do it with 118 agencies, because it's just too big to do that way.
So from the REMAC perspective right now, as we stand, move on. Obviously, we need to try and put some tools together and put them up on the.
I'll communicate with Joe about getting those tools and stuff like that. We can figure something out, and by next meeting we'll come up with proposals.
Hey, Bill, are you still on the phone?
No, Bill.
Phil, are you there?
What do you need from
Well,
him?
now that he's not on anymore, when we were down there doing that training, I was snooping through his office.
You like to snoop.
No, there was some
There was some
documents that were like, he had like a file chart that was on the wall, and there were different QA documents for like STEMI and trauma and BLS, and they were tools that were already there.
We have them, yeah.
If that exists already, then maybe this is something we could incorporate, modify, and put on the REMAC site as well.
I have them. I actually had my secretary retype them because Nikki dug them out of her closet of, so they were very old and like handwritten and scratched, so.
Need to be resurrected.
Yeah, that's good word, that's right.
Okay.
So I can send those to you. There's one on STEMI, there's one on AEDs, there's one on,
Perfect.
I don't know,
I would
there's
also
like
then
6 of them.
And then
Encourage, go ahead.
stuff that we can use on programming that we're putting out here, such as the launch zone, CPAP.
Yes.
When we start rolling out these things on a regional basis, we'd like to have a QA tool, because we're encouraging, we'll say encouraging with a heavy hand, the use of those QA tools. And if we can provide those as resource documents, we can probably get the information back that we're seeking. Good thoughts.
Yeah, truthfully, I feel bad because it's very easy for me because I can go in and create a report and do a retrospective review and give it to them, you know, pull it down. No one has to fill out forms at our end, but that's why we don't use them.
The program is not is one that works within UKCR system.
EMS charts, yeah, it's actually an add-on tool that we purchased.
So, but I would also, because my suspicion is that a lot of our volunteer agencies are not actually meeting their monthly QI requirements, that the individual medical directors and regional councils discuss this and talk about how to, in their region, make it work.
Right. You're right.
Okay.
All right, Dr. Clemency, are you still on the line? Very good. Dr. Clemency has nothing for the ad hoc level care committee, so we will move on then to old business. This was something that was the destination policy, was something that was supposed to come up back in December. This policy, I think, has been discussed among the majority of the positions, and basically is taking what's already out there. It's not actually putting very much new policy into effect, but what it does is take and pull together the different state BLS protocols, things that already exist in our REMAC protocols, and things that come up in other states' bureau policies, and tries to consolidate what are adequate timeframes for patients and transport to specialty designated centers, specifically PCI centers, trauma patients, stroke centers, and then also it talks a little bit about psychiatric patients. So this was really put together by a collaborative effort, and it really just tries to kind of knock down the time frame so that it's easy for providers to find all the information in one concise document, as far as when should we go to the closest hospital, when should we go to a trauma or a STEMI center or a stroke center, what are the appropriate guidelines. There's some other things in there that I don't want to read verbatim about the beginning of it, but I'll just kind of touch on the highlights very briefly. For STEMIs, the decision was made that from the scene you should transport from the scene to a PCI capable center if the transport time is less than 60 minutes. And that time was decided on specifically so that the time from first EMS contact, meaning 911 call, to balloon time could be met within 90 minutes. If we gave them an extra 30 minutes leeway on top of that, that accounted for on-scene times and also prepping the cath lab once they arrived at the hospital. For trauma patients, I think looking at what's already in the REMAC protocol, we decided that a total transport time of less than 45 minutes, and transport time of less than 45 minutes still gets them there from that quote-unquote golden hour, 60-minute time frame. It also talks about pre-notifying the trauma centers as soon as possible. Beth?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Betty Armenia. I'm the trauma program manager at Women and Children, and I'm relatively new. I just came from STAC, where the pediatric subcommittee presented and voted that pediatric trauma transport should be 60 minutes, so that should be coming out from STAC.
Yeah, I heard that.
60 minutes from
Scene,
60-minute transport time or 60 minutes from call?
transport time for pediatric trauma to a pediatric trauma center.
Okay. So for those of you on the phone that can't hear, evidently the STAC has come out with a recommendation for this is pediatric specific.
Pediatric specific is pediatric subcommittee of STAC who presented it.
Do they have any guideline regarding adult trauma patients?
That was not discussed
that was us. So, for those of you on the line, at the staff, their pediatric subcommittee recently recommended that a transport time of 60 minutes to a pediatric trauma center was appropriate. So then the question is, should we change this to make it consistent for adults and pediatrics? Should we keep two separate time frames? And I think, Joe, or Kevin, if you have it in front of you, I believe it's actually, this 45 minutes is actually in our REMAC protocol, so we would actually have to change our REMAC protocol.
Do we know where that number comes from? Is that a recommendation from another body?
It was the old trauma triage guidelines, I believe, before the CDC recommendations. Because it used to be 30 minutes was the magic number. But I beyond that, I don't recall anymore, but that was the old trauma triage guidelines.
I mean, I think we should definitely be consistent, at least, and have 60 for pediatrics. What we do with adults, I don't.
I can review the ACS criteria.
That might, yeah.
There's nothing on the current, I just pulled this from the orange book, there's nothing current on this
That's the
chart.
CDC trauma triage guidelines?
Yes. I'm not seeing a time specified on it.
What does the BLS protocol say? Say an hour?
Whatever the CDC says.
I don't think it's, I don't
think it says the time.
I believe it says a time frame in there.
Yeah, there's got the old EMS provider judgment line on there.
Alright.
From the physicians, any feelings regarding time frame transport for adults in trauma? Should it be 45? Should it be 60? Should it be?
We have no reference point of a national number. That might have changed.
Does anybody have an idea about the numbers of people that we're talking about at 15 years ago?
No idea.
I would say no, no one has an idea how many people fall into that window, to be honest. I mean, really where I think that this fall, comes into effect is like in our, more rural counties talking about, do you go directly to the trauma center? Do you go to the closest hospital? And there is an effect there for some of those agencies, and that is, think about a trauma patient in the back of your ambulance for an hour is a long time, depending on, obviously anybody, if Dr. Young were here, he would say anybody who's unstable, has an unstable airway, the Department of Health always says they go to the closest facility. Right, Ed? Yes, sir. Thank you. Absolutely. But otherwise, people who are otherwise stable,
They're
aren't
looking
state.
at
Brian?
Yes, Henry.
State
What
numbers.
makes it a little bit more difficult is when it comes to time to the closest facilities, the availability of air transport. All this really talks about ground transport, but once you add air transport to the mix, it makes it easier to send trauma patients to the trauma facility without being concerned about it. That if air is available.
Right. So, Henry, this policy just says transport time. It doesn't say whether by ground or by air. So I agree that there is from every place in our region, if you can fly, you can probably make it to a trauma center or a PCI center easily within 45 minutes. The question is, if you're able to fly or not able to fly. And actually here I've got the BLS protocol in front of me, and I will read it. This is under the general section GA, section 9, transport. It says, if mechanism of injury and or physical findings do indicate major trauma, transport the patient to the nearest designated regional or area trauma center if the total time elapsed between estimated time of injury and estimated time of arrival at the trauma center is less than 1 hour. And that's why I think when our REMAC protocols, we took 45 minutes of transport time, because this is from time of injury to time of arrival at the trauma center. My other concern is that for the staff to come out with something that contradicts the BLS protocol is going to be an issue. And I know that's something the staff does not usually look at. So you can feel free to take that back to the staff. But when it comes up, when the staff's recommendation comes to the CMAC and the SEMSCO, which interestingly, the staff meeting was a week before our last CMAC and SEMSCO meeting, and this did not come up at all. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct.
So I think that if we're talking about, depending on how long the time of injury is and how long from the injury to arrival and transport, I think there's a lot of little nuances. So the questions are, do we go by transport time? Do we go by injury to arrival time? And what do we specify?
Injury to arrival is more like a stroke. based, I'm just saying the concept is more like stroke, which
It
is
was always
last
able
seen
now.
more than.
Right. So, in that regard, and in similar time frame to what the stack says, do we want to say from point of injury, time of injury to arrival at the trauma center of 1 hour, rather than transport time of 45 minutes, and keep it consistent for adults and pediatrics? Sure. Sure?
Yes.
Any other feelings, or any other disagreement?
You know, Brian, in these more rural areas, I'm thinking WCA, Brooks, you're taking pediatric trauma patients, on the road, 45 to 60-minute transport time, without potentially involving medical control. Here it says if the transport time is greater than 45 minutes, contact medical control. My preference down in these more rural areas would be to get medical control involved in all of these cases. If we are thinking about making a transport back to an ambulance, specifically ground transfer, that's going to approach the 45 to 60 minute time period. That's a long time to have a trauma patient in the back of an ambulance, no matter who's in the back, taking care of the patient. I think there's so many things that can alter or affect that transport, that involving a medical commander from the get-go in helping make that decision would be appropriate, instead of just having it, in the event that it's going to take longer than 45 to 60 minutes.
So just the background on this was, and I agree 100%, especially, working in a rural area like you. The background on this is that these timeframes already exist and already out there in BLS protocols, and state protocols, and other advisories, and in our WREMAC protocols. And so, and I think that if we do encourage, which we should, medical control, I think we need to have some type of guidelines for people to follow, because not all of our emergency physicians, our EMS physicians, or medical directors have the same understanding of capabilities, lack of resources in the back of the ambulance and that. And that was the point of doing this. The beginning of this that we kind of skipped over in the policy is that it does say very early on that liberal use of online medical control is recommended when any question arises regarding the appropriate transport destination, so that disclaimer was put out before any suggested timeframes. But I still think that we need to give some type of baseline for people to compare to, or to kind of guide them in their decision for that. I agree, 60 minutes with a pediatric trauma is a long drive. Any other comments or concerns on that?
So we're proposing changing from 60 minutes from time of injury, is that what I understand?
That's up to you guys. I think that that's what I feel kind of the sentiment was.
If that's the recommendation, 60 minutes of time of injury, then that's, that.
From what your consistency say, I motion that we change the wording to transfer time is less than 60 minutes from time of injury.
And then lastly, for stroke centers, we talk about, and this comes right out of the state policy, is where it says, transport to the closest stroke center of the total pre-hospital time from last seen normal to when the patient is expected to arrive at the stroke center is less than 2 hours. Again, 2 hours with a stroke patient in an ambulance is a long time, and there is no place, even in the nether regions of Chautauqua and Cattaraugus County, that you can get to a stroke center in 2 hours. I think it's a long drive. I think that that's, again, somewhat concerning, and we should, again, encourage liberal medical control for those cases. However, that already exists in the state policy, and when we actually put this together, we were trying to consolidate, kind of make a resource document, not come out with necessarily new guidelines or something above and beyond, but trying to take what was out there and put it in one concise, streamlined policy for people to refer to. So I think that probably should be kept the way that it is, although I agree it's a long time frame.
And that, we had input from the state on that one too, that we already changed the wording.
Yes.
To be very specific.
Yes, and the other thing is that also if you're outside that window then, and Mike, I think we've talked about this before too, is that the state only recognizes stroke centers, not differentiating between stroke centers and comprehensive stroke centers. And there is a time where you may want to, if you're outside the window, you may want to go to a more comprehensive stroke center but we cannot put that into an official policy or protocol because the state doesn't recognize those. So, yes, Ed?
Dr. Young had to leave unfortunately, because he's made some comments here, and I just wanted to bring them to your attention. I'm not sure if they were previously discussed or not, but where it starts off, where it says most patients with slurred speech or altered mental status, that whole sentence that ends with stroke center there, right after the 2-hour period there, most patients with slurred speech or altered mental status in the absence of unilateral symptoms have non-stroke etiology and do not require transport to a stroke center. He writes on there that no, he says that apparently there's been I'm not sure where he's getting the data, but he says that there's a slew of posterior circulation CVAs, that statement should either be removed or revised in that particular area. And I don't have the background of it.
As the illustrious representative of one of the comprehensive stroke centers, if I see another patient transported for altered mental status from an outside facility for a stroke, I lose my mind.
He's gonna lose his hair.
I understand.
It's purely based off the Cincinnati Stroke Scale.
Yeah.
And there is nothing about altered mental status in there. There is speech. So if you have aphasia, expressive aphasia, that is one point on the Cincinnati Stroke Scale, you can come to a stroke center. I'm fine with the speech thing, but the altered mental status.
Yeah, maybe it's
I mean, posterior stroke is
statement is
classically.
he's talking specifically about posterior circulation CVA, so.
Which is more
I'm not a
ataxia
posterior
based.
circulation CVA expert, so I can't really debate you.
So,
but
could I?
My point being is, I think we should stick to what the state, which
Yeah.
teaches, which is Cincinnati Stroke Scale.
And I'm sure he'll email
Not
his
gospel
specific
recognition
comments, but I
process.
needed to bring that up for sure.
I told him, I went and shook his hand and said hello this morning because it was going to make him mad at some point. He left before I got a chance.
Yeah, you can debate that with him, and I'll be sure to
Yeah.
tell him that Dr. McGee said you're wrong. No, I'm
So-
sorry. And then Medina Hospital's also a stroke center.
Hang on, don't jump ahead.
Sorry.
So, my question is, would we want to then reword that sentence to say, many patients with slurred speech or altered mental status in the absence of unilateral symptoms may have a non-stroke etiology and may not require transport to a stroke center, make it a little bit more, less definitive, would that be?
Or reference to Cincinnati Stroke Scale specifically.
You want to simplify it for the folks who are making decisions. They go to the Cincinnati scale and then we go from there, which is the standard.
I agree, I'm trying to keep everybody happy in the room, or not in the room. Kevin, Joe, Mike, wording on that sentence.
I think you just mix it, to be honest with you. Because you're, in the first sentence you've answered your.
So just take that
You
sentence
see what I'm saying?
out.
Follow the stroke.
Stroke scale.
Yeah, if you come to, because now with the reporting that New York State requires for stroke centers, when you're calling ahead, just like you have to call ahead for trauma now, I need a Cincinnati Stroke Scale. I have to get that. So we have to document it. I need a time glassing normal.
Correct.
We need blood glucose and these other things. Why make this more?
Yeah.
Why make it more confusing than a black and white question we already have?
That's fine, we'll take that sentence out, and I think the other thing to remember is that when you see a patient who arrives in your ER, who doesn't have a positive Cincinnati Stroke Scale and ended up there, we can still QI those and address them.
I agree with Nixon, but I think somewhere in the body of that stroke center and study center, regardless of it being in front of the policy, I think there has to be something referencing, consider, or encourage liberal use of medical control. The last two stroke flights, the star flight took to either Gates or Hammett. One was intoxicated, and one was a meningitis case, not appropriate for helicopter transfer.
I second everything he's saying.
So I think that needs to be, in my opinion, reinforced. I think that, I agree with you that not everybody's, board certified residency trained emergency physicians in rural hospitals, but I think that we need to encourage that resource.
So how do we, because we need to, I guess the point was trying to put it somewhere early in the document so you didn't have to write it in every single section to reiterate the same thing. And I don't think we want to get to the point of requiring medical control to be called for every transport. So
technically, if the patient is a stroke or STEMI or trauma, you need pre-notification for all of this.
pre-notification, but you can already be on the way. You're not talking about contacting medical control.
It depends, like
destination.
see what you're saying, because if you don't use destination,
You're calling your base hospital that.
You're right, because there are challenges in getting a hold of the medical center. I do agree. Depending on which hospital.
Do we want to add some language to the beginning of the document to make it stronger regarding medical control, or
Bold font usually works for that.
what's that?
Bold font.
Bold font? You want me to bold it?
Yeah.
Mike?
I'm fine.
You fine with that? Okay. All right.
I like the chalk duster font.
I do have a question real quick to bring up, and that is regarding specifically, you said Medina is a.
That is correct. We wanted to add Medina to the stroke center.
Yep. And also then Kevin, the VA is not a, no, psychiatric hospital.
It's not a New York State designated psychiatric emergency.
It's not a 939.
Do you guys routinely take acute psychiatric emergencies to the ER, and do you want that? And how do we want to work?
If they are on, the hard line is if they are on New York State papers, we cannot. So, like if they're on 941s, we can't take them because they're not listed with New York State.
Okay.
That being said, if they are not on New York State 941 papers, we can take that.
Like any other emergency room?
We have emergency psych, but we're not registered in New York State, so therefore we can't.
They could be a voluntary.
They could be voluntary, or if the law enforcement otherwise convinces them it's in their best interest to go.
So do you want VA taken out of, I mean, it doesn't fit there because it's not a 939, 941.
The only way you could put it would be.
Do you want to put an asterisk and put?
You could put an asterisk and say, 24-hour emergency psychiatric services cannot accept 941. You'd have to put it in the file. And just so you know, we have looked into this and are still looking into getting that, but we have to convince.
Isn't your like federal status kind of supersede something?
It kind of does the opposite. It makes us not have to follow any local rules, but we can opt to follow. And we'd have to register with New York State to get that designation. It's really a legality issue for the EMS agencies if it comes down to it.
939 psych hospital?
Thank you for that.
What about Wyoming County?
I thought Wyoming.
Psych?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, they have a
Yes.
whole behavior.
They are?
Yeah.
What's the name of the hospital there?
Wyoming County Community Hospital.
W. As you would Wyoming.
There's no mention of 945s in here. We have the it probably fits under the 941, but there's no mention of 945.
Well, we've got a specific 945 hospitals, you know, there's not a
It's all under
specific-
939.
Right, but that's what I'm saying is that it should be inclusive of that. Because the 945 is going to a 939 hospital, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do they always have to know?
No, they do not.
They don't,
945 do not have to go to 941
Right.
hospitals because they're welfare, right?
Or investigation?
No, that's like Horizon.
Crisis service.
It's crisis services.
Crisis service.
Right. That's what I mean. It's like,
Yes, they have to go to a designated psychiatric emergency program.
They do?
I don't think.
I think you're wrong.
I think we.
Let's look it up because this is something that we would need to, we need some directive.
So, my question then, after all these friendly amendments, is do we want to approve this policy or do we want to rewrite it? Yes. Well, Dr. Youngstown,
Are you done with everything else, or no? I'm sorry.
wait, let's go through the other questions first and then we'll get to Dr. Youngstown. Brian?
There's two.
I just have a question about the multiple hospitals nearby paragraph, especially as it pertains to those of us that live in stroke center saturated areas.
Say that again one more time?
The multiple hospitals nearby, especially as it pertains to stroke center saturated areas. For example, my house is what I would consider equidistant from no fewer than 4 stroke centers. Does that 10-minute rule apply to specialty care as well, or are we calculating by the minute as some stroke centers would like us to do?
No, I think there's a word, hang on, I have to go back and say, in this policy, it says somewhere, it says that they're considered equidistant, right?
Yeah, you have an entire paragraph, right, below stroke centers, says multiple hospitals nearby.
Oh, the heading shifted on a different page.
Oh, multiple hospitals nearby, yeah, there you go. Yes, so the decision was that, that we would accept for any specialty hospital, correct, for any hospital, that if they're within, for the duration of time, it's less than 10 minutes for transport, and they don't meet any, you know, they're stable, don't need to go to the closest facility, then we would allow them, you could pick which of those 4 stroke centers you wanted to go to. And that was specifically, I think, because of some of the hospitals trying to funnel patients to them, saying that they were more appropriate than others. And I think that's why we chose that language. Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
I'm
No,
wrong?
I'm not correct.
Thank you.
You're right.
All right. Does that answer your question?
I just want to be absolutely clear.
Sure.
Patient has a stroke.
Yes.
They are located in North Buffalo.
Okay,
There's a lot of designated stroke centers in North Buffalo.
that's correct.
If the time to transport any of those, if I look at all the times, is less than 10 minutes variation,
You can
we
go
can
to
go to any one of those stroke centers. We're not compelled to like choose
That's
to watch
correct. So that,
1.1 as opposed to 1.2.
so if you are at Kenmore and Colvin and you choose to go to, Buffalo General versus going to Kenmore Mercy, that would be appropriate. That's
still
correct.
be compliant with the protocol. That's what
That's correct.
I think where this really came up, Brian.
Is that what you were specifically asking?
Yes.
Was also the trauma code at the best in 33, that doesn't have to go to Buffalo General anymore. It should go to the trauma center. I think y'all thought that made sense.
No, not according to this.
No, so, I'm gonna.
Well, then we should amend it.
This says
So
very Chris
Dr. Young is
unstable
not gonna
restaurant
let you amend
close to
that. I'll
facility.
tell you
I don't care.
I will say that, I think that that's something that we would say is a correct option, although I don't think we can write that in policy because of the Department of Health stance on it. Because it says if any patient is unstable, they should go to the closest facility regardless of if they should
No, it
normally
says
go.
closest appropriate facility. And then we're defining closest.
I can tell you that we had this discussion in multiple emails with Dr. Young, and the department will not support any other wording.
I would argue that guy's very stable.
Yeah, that's a statement.
Especially if you get a mandate.
All right.
Stable.
Yes, Brian, one more.
One more, I had two.
All right,
I have to
two
choose
more.
between them?
Yep.
All right, well, if I have to choose between them, can we clarify what speed of patient's arrival in the hospital is in reference to helicopter utilization?
I'm sorry, where are you?
Third paragraph, first page, paramedical services. The quote is speed of patient's arrival to the hospital.
You would like to change the word to?
I would like to know what speed of patient's arrival means, because you just said that a stroke, a 10-minute coin flip is fine. But here, if we can get another 30 seconds by using a helicopter, we should use a helicopter.
How would you suggest changing that to? Do you have a suggestion, or?
I don't know, maybe come at it by saying patients less than 30 minutes away should,
Use the time for
you know, maybe that's a
So,
better way
you know
to.
what, I'm gonna look up, what I would like to do, because we've changed a lot here, is I would like to take this back, rewrite it, recirculate it, and vote on it at the next meeting, if that's okay with everybody. And I will, there is a New York State, there's a bureau policy on helicopter utilization, as well as we have a REMAC policy from 1997, and there's another policy as well.
In the protocol.
What?
Protocol, we
And
put
it's
it
in
in
our
there.
protocol as well, and we will have to wordsmith that in appropriate, fashion to meet all those, if that's okay with you? Yes, Ed?
Can I just add the last two things?
Add the last two things from Dr. Young, please.
Under,
No, I just want to point out that Dr. Young has had six opportunities to
Brian, you
comment
can
on
do
this.
that.
So,
unfortunately.
go ahead.
Dr. Young gets stuff away.
Yeah, he said that this was very well written the last
Yes,
time. All right.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. Other specialties, he is concerned about the sort of risky related to, not being specific enough to what those other specialties are. He's sort of saying that if we should, with the other protocols that are existent, is that other specialties necessary in this process? Just something he said, it's sort of risky to put that in there without
Well,
much clarity.
I think it says right here, these are only recommendations that providers may not override patient requests without contacting medical control. And so,
Yeah, because I think he was going with, what specific other specialty services we were talking about that are not inclusive of either closest appropriate facility or, STEMI, stroke, cardiac, just something to consider, I guess.
all right, I'm going to consider that because it came up for a reason and I don't know what it was.
I know.
Maybe Dr. Clemens-
Hyperbarics, maybe?
Hyperbarics is going to be a separate discussion we're going to table till next month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dialysis.
And then the only other thing he said, is under hospital volume, he said that in most cases, the first part should be deleted. Just in most cases should be gone, and the rest is. to start with, it is inappropriate for providers to steer patients away from their hospital due to waiting times or perceived delays.
Does anybody have a problem with that? Great.
And that's all, thank you.
All right, I will make those changes, recirculate it for the next meeting that we can vote on, and I'm gonna try and move very quickly through these here. Kevin, so we've already discussed destination and EPAs under old business. Under new business, we wanna take a second real quick, Kevin, about PCC?
Yes, gross misplaced on paper. All I wanted to announce today is that this week we got notification, ECC's paramedics program received its national accreditation, from, after our evaluation by COA, EMSP, and review, and the final vote, we were accredited for the next 5 years, so 2020 we have a accreditation.
That's it?
That's it.
Do you know what it is? When their actual function is for real.
Oh, yeah, it's in the spring.
So, do we plan to vote on it in March instead of today?
Yeah. Does anybody know when Hot Dog Day is in Alfred State? I think it's like April.
Yeah, I mean.
Alright,
They have an issue that we need to address here.
alright. Going down, we're gonna table, unless anybody wants to nominate somebody for chair-elect, we're gonna skip that for now. Carbon monoxide poisoning, we're gonna table for the next meeting. The helicopter policy, as mentioned, there are several policies that, the question was, do we need our own REMAC policy? Does it need to be revisited? It's in our protocols, do we need to change it? Luckily, since Dr. Lynch and Dr. McComey are not here, they have been volunteered to head up a subcommittee at the next meeting that will address these issues. And they both did volunteer before this.
Yeah.
So, and Don, you're working with them, right? The Alfred transport issue is, there's a specific question that they had regarding, and we're gonna bring this up, we'll find out when the actual date is.
April 25th is this right here.
April 25th? Okay, so then it can come up in the next meeting. They wanted to talk about ways that they could somewhat do some type of a standby. Basically, what they're trying to do is to save transporting all their drunk college students to the local emergency room, which we fully support, if it's done the right way, but technically, as the protocols are, they have to, would have to transport to an Article 28 hospital, and they want to keep them in their local infirmary there. And so, I think what we're going to do is suggest that they apply for, because it has to be, they can transport to an alternate destination if approved by the REMAC, and we were going to entertain a waiver for that event specifically, if they were to come up with a policy, unless anyone has any objection to that, and we can discuss that policy in depth next meeting. Scott? No? Good.
Who staffs that, huh?
As a nurse.
Their nurse or nurse practitioner in their clinic with that, that was one of the discussions. All right,
I
that
don't
being,
like that.
What?
I don't like that.
As long as they have time to facilitate it if we table it.
Right, so we've got time to discuss, yeah, we're not voting on anything right now. Or they could send the SMART team down and do a standby.
Yes.
Yeah.
You guys might enjoy it down there.
Right.
Oh, yeah, good, that's an Erie County program, Mr. Gill.
All right, a couple quick things before we get to all the medical director changes, and we're running short on time, but I don't want to keep going too long here. There were some questions brought up about some protocol changes. We've been pushing things off for some time, regarding, because of the collaborative protocols that we thought we would have been adopting by this point, and now we're going to be a whole other year before they come along. So I want to actually spend the time on this, and then we can go through the rest really quickly and try and get out of here soon. But there were a couple of things that have come up in the protocols that I think we need to address. The first was a suggestion to add intranasal to, it's already obviously in Narcan, and to add it to our protocols for fentanyl, midazolam, and for glucagon. Those are the 4 medications that it's recommended for. And now that everybody's carrying atomizers and rolling it out, I think that that's a reasonable thing to do. The other question that came up, and I guess we probably some more discussion, is in the Central New York protocols, now that we can adopt other regions' protocols, in the Central New York protocol, and it actually will be coming out in the collaborative protocols next year, under AEMT, it allows them to draw up and administer at the IM, as opposed to, and our protocols are written, we do not have, they're not allowed to give that other than as a EpiPen, like a BLS provider at this point. There's a significant cost associated with that, And so it was brought up by different agencies that at the AEMT level, since it is in their national and state scope of practice now, to allow them to draw and administer epinephrine IM for anaphylaxis. One to
Okay,
1,000,
it's
0.3.
cheaper.
It's way cheaper.
Just wanted to clarify the cost difference.
So as we go through these, do we want to vote on all these different things one at a time, which I guess is probably the right way to do it? And then any protocol that we were to change still has to be put out for comment and then be officially voted on next month anyways. But regarding intranasal and AEMTs giving IM epi for anaphylaxis, when we vote on both of those together,
Just real quick, does the internet, is it, which protocol does it have to change it? Do we have multiples?
yeah, so we would just, anywhere where it says Versed, fentanyl,
You're just adding
or
a one?
glucagon, just adding intranasal because it's not specifically in there right now. Yes, Joe.
I don't mean to bear or bad news, but a point of order, do we have a quorum to make a protocol vote?
Who's on the line right now?
Yeah, Sarah Kyle, okay.
One, two, how many do we need?
5 representing 2 different regions.
Yep, we're good.
Yes.
Yep. I make a motion that we.
We got 5 anyways. Yeah, and let's wait, do that. Yeah. I'm sorry, guys.
Can he vote?
I can vote.
I didn't know, I didn't know.
Stand up.
Oh, that's what
Make a motion that we accept the intranasal and IM injectable epi.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Oh, second.
I second.
There was a second. All right.
That's what I was.
Next, I've got a bunch of quick protocol changes that we're gonna go through. The next one is, there was some discussion, and, we've talked about this before. Under our airway management, we have under, for CCs and medics, it says, we're talking about, cricothyrotomies and surgical airways. Our specific language says, perform needle or percutaneous cricothyrotomy with an FDA-approved device that's credentialed. The discussion is, and this will change in the collaborative protocols next year anyways, but the discussion was to change that language, take out the FDA-approved statement, and go to the collaborative protocol wording, which says surgical airway if equipped. The rationale being specifically that a lot of our agencies in the southern tier are dual accredited agencies in both New York and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania does allow for performing surgical airways. It is in the state and national scope of practice, and we will be changing to it under the collaborative protocol should we adopt that next year, which I think we will. So is there any opposition or discussion on switching to that language right now?
Do we have to word it in any special way with medical director?
So,
Training,
so
credentialing.
surgical airway if equipped and credentialed. So, that.
What are we defining as surgical airway?
We are not defining it because it is not defined in the collaborative protocols and that was the point. But you as an agency medical director have the ability to define and develop your own policy.
I think I'd like that in the wording then.
If approved and credentialed by your agency medical director?
As approved and credentialed by your medical director.
Approved.
That would change based on the agency with effective.
So we're gonna allow the credential to be determined by.
That's correct.
Well, we're not defining the skill, I was asking if we're not gonna define the skill, we're gonna have to allow the agency medical director to define the skill in that scope of practice, if we're gonna leave it that wide open. The surgical airway could be everything from a Beck 10 to an 11 blade.
MacGyver style is not in the EMT paramedic scope of practice.
Joe, next meeting, push up. Big pen it up too.
What a lot of sort of the pushback from allowing.
I don't know what you're specifically referring to, but I believe in the paramedic scope of practice, they are allowed to do surgical airways with a scalpel, correct?
So apparently there was, an agency that was out of, not out of REMAC, they were out of, what's going on in India. I think it was for Lloyd, that allowed surgical airways and make sure that we circulate what the guys next brain, probably about 200 degrees. So, from that, I think a lot of pushback came for us allowing the surgical airways. I think there's definitely a role for it, so I'm happy with this one.
Right, and I guess what I want to allow for is an agency like Dr. Falks that actually pulls out pink tracheas and credentials on them with their providers, and probably their paramedics have done more pink trachea breaks recently than I have in the last year, so, that's why I think that if we word it with the, credentialing and approval by the medical director, I think that that is appropriate. Is there anybody strongly opposed to that wording? No. All in favor?
I'm good at abstaining.
Okay. Any opposed? I don't know. Mike, did you second my motion? Yep. Thank you very much. All right. All right. The next is CPAP, as we know, is going to be rolled out in the BLS protocol. I would accept a motion for two things. One is to include CPAP into our airway management protocol at the BLS level, since it will be put into the state protocol. And number two, the state protocol will start at a pressure of 10. So the question here is, do we want to then, as our protocol now sits, it says that they start for AMTs and above, we start at 5 and titrate up to 15. And I think there's an ability for our AMTs and higher to still titrate up, but should they be starting at 5 or should they be starting at 10 if our basics will be starting at a pressure of 10? Okay, so if I'm understanding, then we would add CPAP to our airway protocol at the BLS level in accordance with the new state protocol, and that it will be worded to start at a pressure of 10, and then for our advanced AEMT and above can titrate up to 15.
Well, wouldn't you just take it out of our ALS protocol? If it's in the BLS protocol?
So we restate things.
We restate it there at the BLS, it's usually under basic EMT, it says, if credentialed or if approved. That's the same thing for EpiPens, glucometers, albuterol.
Just as a quick
reword, and we'll keep the same language, but.
Probably what we need to do now, if we wanted to shift the wording to starting at 10 for the AEMT and above, we have the ability to do that, but until the commissioner signs this protocol, and we get that sort of quote approval, we can't move it into our
So here's
protocol.
my thought was that because we would have to change our protocol, we still need to put it out for comment and then vote on it at the next meeting, that we could put that, if we voted on it and put it out there, we could put a disclaimer that pending approval by the commissioner and roll out by the Bureau of EMS. Is that appropriate? Was that you making a motion, I heard, Dr. Bard, to accept that wording?
That was making me, yeah, that's what I was doing.
Brian, you think there's also a need for
I'm looking at our, I don't see, here's. Alright, so, what I will do is research that page. You pulling it out, Joe?
I just got rid of it. And,
So, do we want to make the age then whatever it says in the BLS protocol, Ron? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Anybody disagree with that? So, then can we have a motion to add CPAP to our protocol at the BLS level, starting at a pressure of 10 with an age to match the New York State BLS protocol, and allow AEMTs and higher to titrate up to 15.
I'm sorry, when's the date? The thing Joe was talking about.
So we're gonna put, because it has to be officially ruled out, signed by the commissioner, so we'll put a disclaimer that pending approval from the commissioner. only so that if we don't do it now, and it comes out and he signs it in the next month, then we have to change our protocol. Technically, we'd have this, vote on it in March, and then post it for 30 days, and then it would be until May that it would take effect. You okay with that? Good. So I heard Dr. Kenyon and Dr. McGee second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I apologize for going quickly through these. The next suggestion was regarding our dose of midazolam Versed. There is some discrepancy in our seizure protocol right now, and then our sedation protocol. The seizure protocol says 2 milligrams IV or IO, or 5 milligrams IM or intranasally. Our sedation protocol says 2 milligrams IV, IM, or IN, and the concern was that that may be causing some confusion, and we should go to a standard dose for Versed.
2 milligrams intranasal of Versed is nothing. We do 10 milligrams to 2-year-olds, so.
No, I'm sorry. So it is, we're talking about adults first off, and then we can get to peds. So it says it's 2 milligrams IV or IO, or 5 milligrams IM or intranasal.
Okay.
For seizures.
That's what it says for seizures, right? For our sedation protocol, it actually says 2 milligrams IV, IM, or IN.
Right.
Correct. What you're saying is nothing, right? So the suggestion would be to then change the wording to mirror what's already in our seizure protocol for both protocols. And the higher dose for intranasal, correct? Which is in our seizure protocol right now.
Yeah, it says 5 and 5.
Right.
That seems very reasonable.
All right. And then I guess I'll talk about it at the same time. When we talk about our pediatric seizures and pediatric sedation, the suggestion was to clarify that dosage, because right now it is written as 0.1 milligrams per kilogram, and it just says IV, IM, or IN as a maximum of 5 for the sedation, and it does not specify, it says 5 milligrams also. It doesn't specify, difference between IV versus IN. So my suggestion would be to also change our pediatric seizure, pediatric sedation, to word them the same. That would say midazolam 0.1 milligrams per kilogram, maximum dose 2.5 milligrams IV or IO, or 5 milligrams maximum intramuscular or intranasal, so that they top out at the adult dose. So it makes the wording consistent in all protocols for adults and pediatrics, basically. It's not changing any dosage that's in there, other than changing our adult sedation from 2 milligrams to the wording we currently have under seizures. I'm sorry, say that again, Giselle? So the maximum would be 2.5 milligrams IV or intraosseous, or a maximum of 5 milligrams intramuscular or intranasal for pediatrics. Currently that's what it says in our adult protocol now. Our adult protocol doesn't give a weight-based dose. What it would do is it would clarify the maximum dose for pediatrics at 2.5 or 5 milligrams.
So you were talking about increasing or decreasing that 2.5.
I guess I don't know why we ever picked that dose.
No, not maxing it out. So we'd be maxing it either 2.5 IV or IO, or 5.
Yeah, 5 is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's really low. I don't know how we. That needs to be changed.
That's fine. I just was trying to clarify, when you said that we were gonna try to get the same number as adults or talking about
That dose was because that's the.
No, the adults would be maxing at 2.5.
That dose was because it was the adult dose. That's why that dose was set.
Okay. Mark, you had a concern about the
The
dose?
max dose should be 5 and 10 for kids.
So you want to make the maximum dose?
It should be 5 milligrams IV or IO and 10 milligrams IM or IN.
No,
That would then be higher than our current adult doses right now. Which is okay if you wanna do that.
What are the adult doses?
So the standard adult dose, and anybody, you know, can chime in on what they do differently in the emergency room, is 2.5 milligrams IV or IO, or 5 milligrams intramuscular or intranasal.
Yeah, I think that's fine, it's just, I heard you say 2 and not 2.5.
That's for the initial dose, and of course, you
Okay.
go up, but on standing order
Sure,
protocol.
all right,
That's fine,
okay.
that's fine, I think it's, I thought I heard you.
No, Mark had a question that we were discussing too, Joe, that wasn't all directed at you, but, any other discussion about those? Yes, Brian?
On the pediatrics, you listed was 0.1 mg per kg.
It will still list 0.1 mg per kg for pediatrics to a maximum of 2.5 milligrams IVIO.
So it's gonna be 0.1 mg per kg regardless of route. In the adult protocol, we're basically increasing by 2.5 times the dosage when we go to IM or IN as opposed to IV or IO. Did you wanna increase the dosage in pediatrics as well, so that?
No, in pediatrics, it'll be 0.1 mg per kg to a maximum IV or IO of 2.5 or a maximum of 5 milligrams.
Right.
But
Intramuscular.
the dose is calculated
I
prior to the
understand the
route.
maximum, I'm asking about the calculation of the initial dose. The way you just phrased it, it stays 0.1 milligrams across the board. In adults, we're giving 2 milligrams when it's IV or IO. We're giving 5 milligrams when it's IN or IM. I'm asking if you want to increase the dose when it's IM or IN for pediatrics,
You could go
or
to
make the
0.2.
dose exactly the same.
You're saying 0.2.
Right, 0.2 for the IM,
would
IN.
be 2.5 times. I don't know if that's consistent, but.
Mark? I mean, the whole intranasal, I mean, this is a huge can of worms here. I mean, I feel like we're rushing through this, frankly. I mean, intranasal dosing is a whole, I mean, it's complex. You have to calculate dead space, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know. I mean, I think the end dose of 2.5 and 5 or 5 milligrams of IN is a safe dose. So to change it to 0.2 per kilo, and I think that's just getting way too messy. And so your max adult, your max dose, yeah, I think is fine.
Just worded the same.
Yeah.
We're not actually referencing the end dose, we're actually referencing how do we get to the initial dose.
Right.
There's obviously.
And as an initial dose, I think that's fine.
But I
What's your
think,
concern, Tim?
I guess it's, we just have an obviously split dose, because the adult pediatric, we're getting 2.5 milligrams in 2 routes, and 5 milligrams in another route, and then on the pediatric side, we're going to give the same dose for all routes. That was the only question.
So you're saying you would prefer to say 0.1 milligrams per kilogram IV or IO to a maximum of 2.5 milligrams, or 0.2 milligrams per kilogram IM or IN to a maximum of 5 milligrams?
yes,
Which I think is probably appropriate, only because you're saying it's consistent with the adult protocol. I think, the 0.2 is just the.
Right. I missed what you were saying before, I'm sorry.
This is your.
Yeah, no,
your wheelhouse.
yeah,
think
I,
it's-
yeah,
It's generic, but I think it gets the point of what we've done for adults. It's the
Saying
same
the
thing
same
we do with
thing.
adults, it's just wording in mixed for.
Right, if you're setting the maximums regardless, then your entry doses are still weight-based.
I know we're going quick at the end, I'm sorry, I apologize.
right.
Is there any more discussion about standardizing the Versed dose?
It's always just a definite,
Yes.
I didn't hear all that.
No, so the end result, Joe, that they were discussing was that the way that the pediatric dose was worded was 0.1 milligrams per kilogram regardless of route. And so the suggestion was to change it to 0.1 milligrams per kilogram to 0.1 milligrams per kilogram IV or IO to a maximum of 2.5 milligrams, or
2 for 5.
correct for intranasal or IM.
Yeah, okay.
Bump you back one, the state BLS protocol for CPAP, 10 years old.
Okay, that's what Ron said. So, can I have a motion to accept that Versed midazolam dose as discussed? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, I have one last thing. I promise this is the, well, no, it's not. One last protocol thing. And this discussion is right now, under pain management, the issue that's come up is that a lot of our agencies were at the CC paramedic level, did not have narcotics licenses, now do have narcotics licenses, and many of them, when they applied, actually have listed fentanyl as their narcotic of choice. Under our current protocols, we do not have fentanyl under standing order, although it is under standing order in MILREMS, it is under standing order in the collaborative protocols as they are. The suggestion would be to adopt the collaborative protocol dosing and move fentanyl to standing order, and it would be fentanyl. And this is just for adults. There is no pediatric fentanyl dose on standing order currently in the state, although that may change. But the dosage would be fentanyl 25 or 50 milligrams slow. I'm sorry, 25 or 50 micrograms, thank you. Slow IV, IM, IN, or IO. And fentanyl may be repeated in 5 minutes with total not to exceed 100 micrograms. Is there discussion on moving fentanyl? I'm sorry?
25 or 50. Was it 25 to 50 or?
It says 25 or 50. And the reason being that most people give fentanyl.
Vague? It's vague for a standing order.
32. I think the decision was better than putting something in. This comes right out of the collaborative protocol as they're written and in the draft for the next one. I think most people don't do fentanyl weight-based. They take in increments of 25, and this was to try and allow some.
Roughly the math conversion is 10 morphine, 1 Dilaudid, 100 of fentanyl.
Correct.
The generic comparative.
Correct.
So I think saying 25 is like
Close
homeopathic
enough.
dose.
Okay, so we would like
I
to
would just say 50 if we're gonna do it.
50 micrograms, and then maybe repeated in 5 minutes for a total not to exceed 100 micrograms. I mean, I guess that's inherent in all of it.
Again, I think most squads are limiting the amount of fentanyl they carry on a truck, right? I
The
think
200 is what the state says, it's the maximum you can carry anyways.
And I'm not aware that the state is actually any extensions of that.
I'm sorry?
I don't believe the state is for any the waiver of carry over points or some stuff. And just for point 2.24 under the Lawrence protocol, we have a standing order goes for pediatric.
You could be correct there, I'm sure you are, because I'm sure you just looked it up.
I thought there was, so I looked it up first.
Thank you.
That was good.
So, I guess that's a separate discussion if we want to move that to standing order or not for pediatrics as well, but I think that's a bigger can of worms, but I'm certainly willing to entertain it.
Jumping up to the 50 mics, do we want to justify titration? Seems like quick.
I think that because of the onset in that, that's actually how it's actually worded that way in the collaborative protocol, and the decision would be to try and stick with, if we adopt that wording, that allows us to then not have to go through the whole CMAC approval process. This was discussed in depth in the collaborative group about dosing, and this is both in the current collaboratives and in the draft that will come out next year. And that's actually the wording and the time frame that's in there. And I would suggest that we go with something like that rather than something different that we would potentially change here anyways. But there was a very big discussion about time frames in that, and the feeling was that 5 minutes was appropriate.
So we're assuming maximum onset, or onset's probably 1 minute, 1 to 2 minutes, so maximum. We're gonna achieve that in 5 minutes. I mean,
it doesn't say you have to give it again in 5 minutes. This is only if they get a repeat dose.
Yeah.
So it allows it after 5 minutes. I think,
5 minutes just seems, keep 5 minutes, I don't think I'm gonna give that over years. That seems.
but you're still limiting the total dose to 100 now.
Okay.
I'm open to discussion. I'm just raising the points that, these are not my points. This came up from.
I mean, these are standard orders, and they can always call and give it sooner, right? So.
We're not, it's not talking about getting it sooner, he's saying, should we make it a longer time frame rather than 5
Well,
minutes?
if we're gonna go with the 50 mics, is the repeat dose in 5 minutes going too soon? Or should we extend it out to 10 minutes? That's really my.
I think the
I think the
The
point is.
offset to that would be the low dose anyways.
Dose, but that's really trying to bring the patient up to a baseline.
What were you saying, Kevin?
I just didn't know what you said.
I think I feel more comfortable with it as long as I think it's 100 mics total. So that's, which it is, there's 100 mics total. It's not, it's
I think
a
often
good,
most,
that's a good dose.
we give 100 mics at a time.
Yeah, upfront, right. And this is starting at 50, and that's what Josette's point was, is that this is getting them up to 100, not giving it all at once.
Really, you're just, yeah, slow titration.
Right, slow titration, that's the word. So, is there a motion to move fentanyl to standing order with the dosage as discussed?
For adults.
Sorry, Kevin?
For adults.
For adults only, correct. All right, Josette, Kevin, made the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Is there anyone who ever really wants to discuss fentanyl at the standing order at the pediatric level?
No.
That's a bigger, thank you. All right, moving on, then I'm going to ask that we can entertain a motion to accept all at once the, all of these? Yeah.
Yep.
Numbers 6 through 13, which would include medical director changes, PAD notifications, epi notifications, albuterol, EPCR approvals, level of care changes, naloxone, glucometry, as spelled out in the agenda. Is there a motion to accept all of those as written?
Under the question.
What?
Under the question, one that didn't make it on here, that's just a formality, that it was supposed to be on November and it never carried over to this. My
There's North
mistake.
Collins?
This is the Collins Fire Company. It's just a BLSFR, it's a conditional approval, that's it.
Okay.
And Dr. Billtier is your medical director.
Yes. So then I would ask that we make a motion to accept numbers 6 through 13 with the addition of comments.
So moved.
All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Does anybody have anything else? For the love of God, say no.
I have a motion to adjourn.
All right, I will entertain that motion. Thank you, everyone, for bearing with us for that long meeting.
Good to see you.
Okay.
Oh,